I raised my daughter to be strong, independent, capable of anything. 35 years teaching elementary school taught me how to spot the warning signs, the controlling behaviors, the isolation tactics, the gradual erosion of a person's sense of self. So when Natasha married Preston, I thought I was just being an overprotective mother. I was wrong. The bruise on her wrist that Thanksgiving wasn't from gardening. The canceled lunch plans weren't because she was busy. And the text message that arrived at 11:23 p.m. saying, "Grandpa's jam recipe." That was our code for he's going to kill me tonight. To understand how we created that code, I have to start from the beginning. When Preston was still the perfect son-in-law. Thank you for being here. Before we begin, leave me a quick comment. Have you ever kept something important quiet to protect someone you love? Just yes or no. Your perspective matters more than you know. A quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling purposes. What matters is the lesson at the heart of this story. Mildred Graves thinks I'm the poorest woman in Shelby County, and I let her believe it. She arrived at 6:45 Saturday morning with pumpkin bread wrapped in foil, picking her way across the sagging porch boards. At 80 years old, with a baker's habit and 40 years living across the county road, Mildred had never once suspected what lay beneath my dirt. "I worry about you out here all alone, Lorraine," she said, pressing the warm loaf into my hands. "If you ever need anything." I smiled the way I'd learned to smile, grateful. A little tired. At 60, with calloused hands and a flannel shirt faded from 100 washings, I looked exactly like what I wanted people to see. A retired school teacher barely scraping by. "I'm fine. Mildred, really. The tomatoes are coming in nice this year." She glanced at the peeling paint, the screens with holes I'd never bothered to patch. "This old house, if you need help with repairs, it stood this long, it'll stand a bit longer." "Well, you know where I am, just across that field." I watched her walk back to her car, waving once before pulling away. The moment her taillights disappeared, I unwrapped the bread. Still warm. Mildred was a good baker, a good neighbor. And she had no idea who I really was. I stood on that sagging porch and looked out at 3,000 acres of red Tennessee clay stretching to the horizon. Morning sun turned it gold. People saw dirt. I saw $45 million. The land itself was worth $12 million. Beneath it, lithium veins ran deep, mining royalties that would pay out $28 million over the next 30 years. Then there were the stocks Eugene had bought in the 90s. Careful investments that compounded quietly into $5 million more. All of it locked in trust. All of it invisible. How many times had I watched neighbors assume poverty meant powerlessness? They saw the rusted truck, the house that needed paint, the same 3 shirts I rotated through the week. They never thought to ask why a woman with a teaching pension chose to live this way. I never fixed this house. There was a reason for that. Eugene and I had bought this property 40 years ago for $60,000. Back when 3,000 acres of clay was considered worthless. Back when nobody knew about the lithium sleeping underneath. He'd died 6 years ago on a tractor he'd been meaning to replace. And I'd mourned him properly. Black dress at the funeral. Casseroles accepted from neighbors who thought I couldn't afford to eat. The truth was more complicated. You learn things when you teach elementary school for 35 years. You learn how to hide in plain sight, how to watch without being noticed, how to plan 3 moves ahead while everyone assumes you're just trying to get through today. I learned those lessons standing in front of 25 6-year-olds every morning, and I never forgot them. The morning air carried the smell of turned earth and coming rain. Across the field, Mildred would be putting away groceries, maybe calling her daughter to report that poor Lorraine Caldwell still hadn't fixed her porch. The narrative would hold. It always did. Inside, the house smelled like old wood and yesterday's coffee. I cut a slice of Mildred's pumpkin bread and ate it standing at the kitchen window, looking out at land that stretched farther than most people's ambitions. 3,000 acres, $45 million. And she thought I couldn't afford paint. Someday Mildred would understand why I let her pity me. Someday a lot of people would understand. But not yet. Not until the time was exactly right. The phone rang inside the house, the old landline on the kitchen wall that nobody used anymore. Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock exactly. I set down the bread and walked toward it slowly. This call came every week at this exact time, and I always answered before the second ring. I picked up the receiver before the second ring and said nothing, just waited for the voice that had called every Wednesday at 7 for the past 4 years. This week, okay? The man's voice came through calm and professional. Barrett Whitfield, though I wouldn't speak his name aloud on this line. 52 years old, and the Nashville estate attorney I'd hired in secret the week after Eugene's funeral. Not yet. Soon. Forensics came back, deleted texts recovered. Ready when you are. I watched dust motes drift through morning light. Keep it. Don't move until I say. Understood. Same time next week. Same time. The line clicked dead. 4 years of Wednesday calls. 4 years of careful preparation while everyone assumed I was just a grieving widow who couldn't afford to fix her house. That afternoon, I knelt beside my bed and pulled out the rusty paint can I kept there. The label said Barn Red, but it hadn't held paint in a decade. Inside a 47-page trust document, an emergency contact list, and Eugene's diary. I lifted out the diary leather cover, worn soft, pages yellowed. Eugene had been dead 4 years, killed at 62 when the tractor rolled on the East Ridge. But his handwriting still looked urgent. The entry was dated 3 months before the accident. How long should a mother wait before moving against a threat she's certain of, but her daughter hasn't named yet? I read the words I'd memorized. The kind of man I fear most for our daughter, one who learns to control through fear because he grew up afraid. If I'm not here to recognize him, you do it for me. You see what I miss in children. Eugene had taught second grade for 30 years. He knew how to read people. He'd written this warning without a specific face in mind, just a profile, just a fear. But I'd found the face 2 years into Natasha's marriage. You saw him before he existed. Eugene, I said to the empty room, 3 months before you died. You described him perfectly. The diary continued, watch for the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The man who needs to be right more than he needs to be kind. The one who tracks small mistakes and stores them for later use. I'd seen all of it. Thanksgiving dinner, 2nd year of the marriage. The way Preston corrected Natasha's story about their vacation. The way his hand rested on her shoulder, not affection. Possession. The way she'd stopped mid-sentence and changed her words to match his version. Small things, the kind of things people miss if they're not watching. Dead men don't protect their daughters, but dead men who write down their fears before they die can arm the living. I placed the diary back in the paint can next to the sealed envelope I'd prepared, open when Natasha needs, written across the front. Inside was a blank check with Eugene's signature from before his death. Fully funded and waiting. Emergency money if she needed to run. I'd never had to give it to her. I hoped I never would. But I'd built other things instead. Better things. Things that would last longer than one escape. I slid the paint can under the bed and walked to the window. Through the trees, 3 miles south, I could barely see Natasha's house. The house she shared with Preston Harrington, the man Eugene had warned about without ever meeting him. Tomorrow was Sunday dinner, and Preston would be coming here. He'd smile and compliment my cooking and help clear the dishes. He'd play the good son-in-law while I watched every movement. Every word. Every moment his mask slipped. I already knew his name. I'd known since the 2nd year of their marriage. Sunday came with roasted chicken and the truth I'd been waiting to confirm. Preston Harrington walked into my house 45 minutes late without knocking. Phone already in his hand. And didn't apologize to anyone. He arrived in his black Audi at 1:45 for our 1 o'clock dinner, 38 years old, commercial real estate broker from Memphis, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes when he looked at my daughter. My daughter Natasha, 34 and teaching kindergarten like I once did, smiled when Preston spoke, but her hand shook slightly, setting down the water pitcher. "Smells good," Preston said, dropping into the chair at the head of my table without being invited to sit there. He scrolled through his phone while Natasha served him chicken, corn, roasted potatoes. She moved around him with practiced efficiency, anticipating which serving spoon he'd want. positioning the salt within his reach before he asked. When does a daughter learn to pour water before it's requested? From love or from managing a landmine? Natasha, how was the kindergarten class this year? I asked, passing her the bread basket. She opened her mouth to answer. She's been having some trouble with the schedule, Preston said, not looking up from his screen. Thinking about cutting back hours. Natasha's mouth closed. She buttered her bread in silence. I watched this happen the way I'd watched it happen at every Sunday dinner for 2 years. The small interruptions. The answering for her. The way she'd started a sentence 3 times in the past 20 minutes and never finished one. That must be difficult, I said to Natasha directly. You always loved teaching full-time. Well, priorities change, Preston said. That's not how it happened. You always get details wrong. He wasn't even talking to her. Now he was correcting something she'd said 10 minutes ago about their vacation. Natasha nodded slightly, rearranging the story in her mind to match his version. This was what Eugene had warned about. The man who needed to be right more than he needed to be kind. I cut my chicken slowly. Watching. Preston ate with his phone propped against the water glass, scrolling between bites. Natasha ate almost nothing, just pushed food around her plate and monitored his empty glass, his napkin, his mood. More water? She asked quietly. He grunted without looking up. She reached for the pitcher. Her sleeve slid up. For 3 seconds. I saw it, clearly dark purple bruises circling her wrist in the unmistakable shape of finger marks. 4 on one side, thumb on the other. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave prints. Natasha yanked her sleeve down fast, but not fast enough. Our eyes met across the table. Hers filled with shame and something worse. A silent plea. Don't say anything. Don't make it worse. Don't make this real by naming it. Mine must have shown what I felt because her face went pale. That bruise wasn't from a fall or an accident. Those were finger marks from someone who knew exactly how hard to grip. Preston noticed nothing. He was reading something on his phone, smiling at the screen. This is great, by the way, he said absently. Better than last time. Natasha's hand trembled as she set down the pitcher. More chicken? Anyone? I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, holding her gaze. Thank you. The rest of dinner passed in careful small talk. Weather, tomatoes, the county fair next month. Preston dominated the conversation when he chose to speak, scrolled his phone when he didn't. Natasha served dessert pecan pie she'd brought from home and cleared plates while Preston explained Memphis real estate trends. 1. Hadn't asked about. I poured coffee slowly, asked Preston about his current projects in that same mild voice I'd used for 35 years calming upset children. He answered, pleased with himself, unaware of what I'd just seen. He thought I didn't notice the bruise. The interruptions. The way my daughter had learned to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. That was his first mistake with me. That bruise wasn't the first time I'd seen evidence. It was just the first time I'd seen proof. 3 years before I saw those finger marks. I watched my daughter's hands twist her apron at Thanksgiving, while everyone else laughed at her pie. Thanksgiving 2022, Natasha's first holiday hosting as a newlywed. She'd been married to Preston 6 months, and she'd spent 2 days preparing dinner in my kitchen because their Nashville apartment was too small for guests. She'd made turkey, cornbread dressing, green beans with bacon, sweet potato casserole, and pecan pie using her grandmother's recipe, Eugene's mother's recipe that had been passed down for 60 years. We were 12 around the table, extended family, a few neighbors. Preston's parents drove up from Memphis. Everyone was full and comfortable and reaching for dessert when Preston took his first bite of Natasha's pie. He chewed slowly, set down his fork with exaggerated care, smiled that smile that didn't reach his eyes. Wow, Em, this is really sweet, he said loudly enough that conversation stopped. Did your grandma actually teach you to make it this way? The table went quiet. Natasha's face colored. I followed the recipe exactly, she said, trying to laugh it off. Maybe I measured wrong. No, it's fine, someone said quickly. Tastes fine to me, Natasha. But Preston kept going, still smiling, still charming. I mean, it's just very sweet, like almost too sweet to eat. But hey, good thing you're better at teaching than baking, right? Everyone laughed uncomfortably. Natasha laughed with them, but her hands betrayed her. She gripped the hem of her apron, the same unconscious gesture she'd made at 8 years old when kids teased her at school, and twisted the fabric between her fingers. You teach children long enough, you learn the difference between genuine laughter and the kind that's trying to please someone dangerous. I watched her shoulders curve forward slightly, protective. Watched her smile not reach her eyes. Watched her quietly pull her slice of pie back, untouched. While Preston continued telling everyone about his latest real estate project. The pie wasn't too sweet. I'd tasted it. It was perfect, exactly as Eugene's mother had made it for 40 years. Preston had humiliated my daughter in front of her family, disguised it as teasing, and made her apologize for following a recipe correctly. And he'd done it smiling, charming, unaware that he'd just shown me exactly who he was. That's when I knew. Not from violence, yet not from threats, but from watching my daughter apologize for a pie that wasn't too sweet. Eugene's diary had warned me, watch for the smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The man who needs to be right more than he needs to be kind. I just watched it happen over pecan pie. The rest of the evening passed in careful normalcy. People ate, talked, cleared dishes, said their goodbyes. Preston kissed Natasha's cheek when they left. She said that she told everyone what a great cook she was, despite the pie. Everyone laughed again. Natasha waved from the driveway. Standing close to him, her body language smaller than it had been that morning. I waved back, smiled, closed the door. Then I sat alone in my kitchen at 11:30 and dialed a number I'd found that afternoon, an estate planning attorney in Nashville, whose website said he specialized in protecting inherited property. When he answered, groggy with sleep, I asked one question. If someone wanted to steal inherited property through marriage, how would they do it? There was a long silence. Then, ma'am, who is this about? It's hypothetical, I said. We both knew I was lying. His name was Barrett Whitfield, and it was the first conversation of hundreds we'd have over the next 3 years. Barrett answered that first call with legal advice I didn't want to hear. Document everything. Watch for isolation. Wait until you have evidence, not just instinct. 6 months later. The evidence was everywhere. By spring, I'd stopped expecting Natasha's Tuesday night phone calls. The ritual we'd kept since she was 14 had quietly ended without discussion. She didn't announce she was stopping. She just stopped. First, she'd miss 1 week, then 2. Then a month passed, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time we'd talked without Preston in the room. I kept a mental ledger. April Natasha stopped attending Baptist church on her own. If Preston couldn't come, she stayed home. 20 years she'd been in that choir. Never missed a Sunday unless she was sick. Now she was always too tired when he had other plans. May, 2 of her closest friends from college, women she'd known since she was 18, texted me separately asking the same question. Mrs. Caldwell, Natasha hasn't returned my calls in 2 months. Do you know if she's okay? We used to meet for coffee every week, the second one wrote. Now she says she's too busy. Is something wrong? Too busy, I said to my empty kitchen, reading the text for the 3rd time. That's what they all say when they're being isolated. Each change seemed innocent alone. A busy schedule. A devoted husband who wanted to spend time with his wife. A woman prioritizing her marriage over old friendships. Together they formed a cage. Control doesn't announce itself with chains. It starts with, "What do you think?" Asked so many times, you forget how to think alone. June brought proof I couldn't ignore. Saturday morning farmer's market, the one Natasha and I used to browse together every week. I was at the tomato stand when I saw them approach from the parking lot. Preston's hand on Natasha's lower back, guiding her through the crowd. To anyone watching, they looked like a happy couple. Attentive husband, loved wife. I watched from behind my sunglasses as Natasha picked up carrots, glanced at Preston before adding them to her basket. She selected soap, checked his face for approval before purchasing. She reached for tomatoes, then paused. "Do you think we need these?" she asked him. "Or should I get the organic ones?" "Whatever you think, babe," Preston said. Pleasant tone, gentle smile. "You're the one who'll cook them." Natasha stood there holding carrots and tomatoes, uncertain. Maybe the organic? Or what do you prefer? I'm good either way. But she didn't move. She stood there, waiting for a real answer. For permission disguised as preference. And he knew it. I saw it in the pause before he spoke. The tiny smile when she looked confused. The organic ones are fresher, he finally said. She put the regular tomatoes back immediately. You know what's worse than watching someone you love disappear? Watching everyone else mistake the kidnapping for romance. The vendor complimented what a nice couple they made. Preston smiled, thanked him, kept his hand on Natasha's back as they moved to the next stall. She glanced back once, not at me. I was too far, just back at the regular tomatoes. Like she wasn't sure if she'd made the right choice. She didn't know how to buy vegetables without his approval anymore. I stood at that tomato stand after they left, staring at the organic ones she'd chosen, and I heard Barrett Whitfield's voice from that first midnight phone call 6 months ago. The first thing they do is isolate, cut off friends, family, independent decisions. By the time you notice, they're already gone. I was noticing, and I understood this wasn't year 1 anymore. This was year 2, and Natasha was disappearing, while everyone smiled and called her marriage close. I needed to know if Preston was isolating her for love or for something else entirely. I needed to know if his motive was control or money. Preston answered that question himself 10 months later. Preston Harrington showed up at my farm alone on a Tuesday afternoon in April, the first time in 3 years of marriage he'd visited, without Natasha beside him. I was washing dishes when I saw his black Audi pull up by the barn. He got out, glanced at the house, then walked directly toward the east cornfields without coming to knock. Just headed straight for the land, like a man who'd been thinking about it for a while. I dried my hands and followed at a distance. He stood at the field's edge, hands in his pockets, staring across 3,000 acres of red Tennessee clay to the horizon. The way a man surveys property, the way someone appraises value. He didn't look like a son-in-law visiting family. He looked like a buyer measuring an investment. I let him stand there for 3 full minutes before I spoke. "Beautiful land, Lorraine," he said when he finally noticed me, not startled at all. "I never realized how much you have out here." 3,000 acres, I said. Been in Eugene's family since 1947. Must be worth quite a bit by now. He said it casually, like small talk, but his eyes were still on the land, calculating. How many men stand in a field imagining the woman beside them dead so they can own what she's standing on? Worth changes, I said. Depends who's counting and why they're counting it. He smiled that smile. Just thinking about family's future, you know, long-term planning. Long-term, I repeated. We walked back toward the house in silence. He made comments about the barn needing repair, the fences showing age, the tractor I ought to replace. Listing maintenance costs like he'd already budgeted for them, like he'd already decided this property was his problem to solve. Halfway back, he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What do you plan to do with all this? After, you know. He trailed off, didn't finish. After I'm gone, I finished for him. He gave an awkward shrug. Just, you know, thinking about Natasha, making sure she's taken care of. This land is in trust, I said, watching his face. Irrevocable trust, established in 2020. Natasha can't sell it, can't gift it, can't mortgage it. Neither can anyone she marries. The trust owns it. She just benefits from it. Preston stopped walking. For exactly 1 second, his face went blank. Not confused, not curious, blank. The face of a man whose plans just hit a wall he didn't know existed. Then he laughed, forced and sharp. Wow, you're really careful. That's smart, I guess. Eugene was smart, I said. He thought ahead. That 1 second freeze before he laughed told me everything he'd been counting on this land, building plans around it. And I just showed him the plans were impossible. Well, good to know, Preston said, still trying to sound casual. Natasha never mentioned that. She doesn't know the details, I said. Doesn't need to yet. He nodded slowly, already backing toward his car. I should get going. Just wanted to stop by, check on you. Without Natasha, I observed. She's working late today, grading papers. He left 10 minutes later without mentioning Natasha again. Didn't ask about her childhood, didn't comment on family photos, didn't say anything that wasn't related to land value or planning. That night at 9:15, I called Barrett Whitfield. "Start phase 2, I said. He paused. We'd discussed this scenario for 18 months. "You're sure?" "He came alone to survey my land and asked when I'm going to die. I'm sure." Barrett's voice changed sharper, focused. "Good. He just showed his hand. I'll have the forensics team ready. What are we looking for? Evidence he's been planning fraud, digital footprints, deleted searches about trust law, inheritance challenges, estate access. If he's been researching how to break your trust, we'll find it." I hung up and stood at my kitchen window looking toward the east field where Preston had stood that afternoon, measuring my land like it was already his. He wasn't isolating Natasha out of insecurity. He was positioning her for inheritance fraud. Natasha arrived at the farm on a Tuesday afternoon in late July, her sedan kicking up dust on the gravel drive. I watched from the kitchen window as she parked, then sat motionless behind the wheel for 3 full minutes before getting out. We settled on the back porch with sweet tea. She stared at the pasture where 2 horses grazed near the fence line. The ice in her glass melted. The condensation dripped onto her knee. She didn't move to wipe it away. 20 minutes passed in complete silence. I'd learned this much from Barrett: don't fill the quiet. Abusers use silence as a weapon, conditioning their victims to fear the void. If I pushed Natasha to speak, I'd become another person demanding performance from her. So I waited. At minute 23, she spoke. "He doesn't hit me." I nodded. "I know, sweetheart. He just stops talking. For days sometimes." She traced the rim of her glass with one finger. "Last month, it was 6 days. I made dinner wrong. The chicken was dry. Apparently, he didn't say a word to me until the following Monday. Ate every meal in silence. Walked past me like I wasn't there." The pattern interrupt landed exactly where I'd felt it coming. Natasha was describing psychological torture, and she still prefaced it with, "He doesn't hit me," as if emotional abuse didn't count. "That's punishment," I said. "That's calculated cruelty." "I know," her voice cracked. "But when I try to tell someone, they say, 'Oh, the silent treatment,' like it's just a minor annoyance. They don't understand what it does to you, being erased in your own home. Watching him function perfectly, going to work, answering calls, laughing with colleagues. And then the second I enter the room, I'm invisible." I reached across and took her hand. "I understand. And I need you to know something. You're not crazy, and you're not alone." She started crying then, silent tears that she wiped away quickly, trained to show no weakness. "I need to teach you something," I said. "A way to communicate with me that Preston can't detect. If you ever need help, any level of help, I need to know." She looked at me with sudden focus, the fog lifting. "What do you mean?" 3 levels, disguised as recipe questions. If you call or text asking about my strawberry jam recipe, that means you need to talk, but it's not urgent. If you say it's your grandma's recipe, you're remembering. That means something's wrong and I should check on you within 24 hours. The second interrupt came as I revealed the hierarchy she was absorbing this, like battlefield intelligence, her mind already cataloging threat levels. "And the third level?" she asked. "If you ask about the recipe but say it's your other grandma Eugene's mother instead of mine, that's the emergency code. That means real danger, immediate response." Natasha nodded slowly. "Strawberry jam from your mom is level 1. Strawberry jam from grandma is level 2. Strawberry jam from Eugene's mom is level 3. Exactly. He'll hear you talking about jam recipes and think nothing of it. What happens at level 3? I held her gaze. "Barrett and I come get you. No questions, no delay." She tested the system, repeating it back. "So if I texted right now saying, 'I'm trying to remember Grandma Whitfield's strawberry jam recipe,' that would be level 3, real danger." She got it right immediately. And that terrified me more than anything. She didn't hesitate, didn't second guess which grandmother meant which threat level. Some part of her had already been running scenarios, calculating escape routes. She left 20 minutes later. As her sedan disappeared down the drive, I called Barrett. "She knows the emergency codes," I said, "and she learned them too fast." His pause stretched 2 seconds too long. "That means she's already planning for the worst-case scenario. Or she's already living it." By November, my daughter had quit her teaching job, cut her hair short, without explanation, and stopped returning calls from anyone who wasn't Preston. 2 weeks after teaching Natasha the emergency codes, I watched for signals. What I got was 3 months of silence and surface-level texts that read like hostage messages. "All good here. Talk soon." Nothing about strawberry jam. The changes started in September. First, the haircut. Natasha had worn her hair long since high school, thick chestnut waves past her shoulders. One Sunday, she appeared at church with it cropped short to her collar. "Sweetheart, when did you—" "It's just easier this way. Mom, less maintenance." Her hand went to her neck like she was checking to make sure it was really gone. Preston stood beside her, one hand on her lower back. "Looks more professional, don't you think?" I thought about Eugene cutting off pieces of me for 32 years. The haircut wasn't about maintenance, it was about control. By October, she'd stopped attending coffee hour after church. No more Saturday lunch texts. No more calls about canning recipes or garden advice. Then, in early November, I ran into Sarah Chen at the grocery store. She'd taught 2nd grade next to Natasha's kindergarten classroom for 6 years. "I was so sorry to hear about Natasha's health issues," Sarah said. "We miss her terribly." I stood holding a bag of potatoes, keeping my face neutral. Health issues. That's what Principal Morrison said when she resigned, that she needed time off for health reasons. Natasha had quit teaching. She'd loved those kindergartners. She'd never mentioned health problems or resignation. I called her that night. "Natasha, Sarah Chen said you resigned." I needed a break. For my health. Preston thinks it's for the best. Every sentence ended with what Preston thought. Her own voice had disappeared. Abuse doesn't announce itself with one dramatic act. It's 1,000 small cuts, each explained away, until you look down and realize you're bleeding out. Hair was maintenance. Job was health. Isolation was being busy. Every change had a plausible excuse if you didn't see the pattern. But I saw it, and I wasn't the only one. Mildred appeared on my porch late November, wearing her quilted jacket and carrying a small spiral notebook. She'd brought pickled beets as an excuse. "Can we sit a minute?" she asked. We settled in the rocking chairs. November wind rattled bare branches overhead. Mildred set the beets aside and pulled out the notebook. "I've been keeping track," she said. 47 times I've seen things that don't add up. Wrote every one down. What kind of things? Preston leaving at 2 a.m. without Natasha. A silver Honda parked outside their house for hours during the day. Him stumbling out of his car at 2 a.m. Strange patterns I couldn't explain away. You know what's more valuable than one person's suspicion? An 80-year-old neighbor with insomnia and a habit of writing everything down. "How long have you been watching?" I asked. "Since last October, 14 months. Her weathered hands rested on the notebook. At first I thought maybe I was imagining things. But the patterns kept repeating. Always 2 a.m. Always the same silver Honda. So I documented. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She looked at me with sharp blue eyes. "I was waiting to see if you already knew. Watching you watch them at church, at the store. Saw you notice the haircut. Saw your face when she stopped coming to coffee hour. Now I know you do. Can I keep this?" Mildred slid the notebook across the table. "I've been waiting for you to ask." I opened it that night. 47 entries in careful teacher's handwriting. October 3rd, 2:17 a.m. Preston's Audi leaves driveway alone. October 18th, 3:45 p.m. Unknown silver Honda parks outside house. 2 hours. November 2nd, 1:55 a.m. Preston returns stumbling. Every entry dated, timed, specific. Mildred had been watching longer than I'd been planning, and she'd been watching for me. The letter from Memphis Premium Properties arrived on a Thursday in a cream-colored envelope that looked expensive enough to mean trouble. I'd spent 2 days studying Mildred's notebook, memorizing Preston's 2 a.m. departures and the silver Honda visits. but I hadn't expected him to hand me a felony in my own mailbox. I opened the envelope at my kitchen table. Embossed letterhead, professional language, a purchase offer for 800 acres of my farmland. The number jumped out, $6. $2 million. Then I saw the contact line. Preston Harrington, authorized representative of landowner. I read it twice, once for the facts, once for the fury. He'd forged my power of attorney, presented himself to a real estate firm as my legal representative with authority to sell property worth over $6 million. Property he didn't own, authority he'd never been given. I set the letter down with steady hands. Didn't call police, didn't call Natasha, called Barrett. He answered on the second ring. Lorraine? Barrett, you just got another criminal charge to add to the file. What kind? Forgery and real estate fraud. He's trying to sell 800 acres of my land. Sharp intake of breath. He forged your signature. Power of attorney, complete fabrication. The real estate firm thinks I authorized him to negotiate on my behalf. When did you receive this? 2 minutes ago. Don't touch it again without gloves. That's evidence of criminal fraud. Forgery. And potentially wire fraud if communication crossed state lines. Barrett's voice shifted into lawyer mode. What's the offer amount? $6.2 million. Silence stretched 3 seconds. $6.2 million for land he didn't own, using authority he didn't have, in my name. Lorraine, Barrett said carefully, this changes everything. This is felony fraud with a clear paper trail. I can draft a criminal complaint today. Not yet. If we file now, he goes to ground. I need to know what else he's forged. That's a risk if the sale progresses. He needs my actual signature to close. Power of attorney gets him to the negotiating table. But deed transfer requires notarized signatures from the owner. He's testing whether I read my mail carefully. Barrett was quiet a moment. You want to let him think you didn't notice. I want him confident, overconfident. All right, but document everything. And Lorraine, don't confront him. I won't. I hung up and sat with the letter another minute, reading the firm's information, the property description, the timeline. Then I placed it in the kitchen drawer beneath a 3-day-old newspaper, exactly where Barrett had instructed me to store evidence, secure but accessible, preserved but not obviously filed. Then I walked outside to water the tomato plants. November air was cold, the garden half dead from early frost. I turned on the hose and moved down the rows, letting water soak into dirt around each plant. From the street, anyone passing would see exactly what they expected, a 60-year-old widow in faded jeans tending a shabby garden. The best disguise isn't a costume. It's letting people see exactly what they expect and missing what's hidden underneath. I adjusted the hose to a gentle stream, each plant still producing late-season fruit I'd probably never pick. Across the street, a car slowed, probably someone noticing the peeling paint. Feeling sorry for the old woman who lived here. Good. Let them see a poor widow watering vegetables. Let Preston think his forgery sat unopened in junk mail. That I was too old to understand legal documents. Because while I stood here in dirt-stained jeans appearing helpless, Barrett Whitfield was already drafting the criminal fraud complaint that would add 5 to 7 years to whatever sentence Preston eventually faced. Neighbors see what they expect: an old teacher watering tomatoes, not a woman building a felony case. 2 days before Christmas, Preston arrived without warning. I watched through the window as his Lexus crunched gravel. Same predatory confidence, same entitled stride. He knocked once, then let himself in. The folder under his arm was thick, professional. This wasn't a social call. Barrett's fraud complaint was still being drafted, but Preston didn't know that. He thought the forged real estate letter sat unnoticed in my junk mail. He thought I was exactly what I appeared to be, an old widow who didn't read documents carefully. I stayed seated in my chair by the fireplace. Didn't rise to greet him. Mother Lorraine. He set the folder on the coffee table between us, opening it to reveal a document with a signature line highlighted in yellow. I need $80,000. Temporary bridge loan. 6% interest, all documented. Not a request, not even really a question. A transaction he expected me to complete. "You have a contract?" I asked. "Right here, standard promissory note. Tasha would want you to help family." He pushed the folder closer. The highlighted line waited for my signature. The entry twist landed exactly where I felt it. This wasn't an emotional plea or a desperate ask. Preston had escalated to calculated business transaction interest rates, legal language, professional presentation. He'd planned this approach the same way he'd planned the forged power of attorney. I folded my hands in my lap. The land, accounts, everything, all trust protected. I can't write that check even if I wanted to. His confident expression cracked. "What do you mean trust protected?" "Irrevocable trust. Requires Barrett Whitfield's signature as trustee. 90-day waiting period. Documented need verification. Eugene set it up before he died." "Then call your lawyer. Override it. You're the mother." "The trust doesn't care who I am. Eugene made sure of that." Preston stood, paced to the window, ran his hand through his hair. I watched him process the obstacle, watched the calculations happening behind his eyes. I remembered Eugene's voice from the hospital bed in 2020. Morphine clear, despite the cancer eating through his lungs. Make it impossible for him to win fast. Fast predators quit when the hunt takes too long. The trust wasn't a wall. It was a maze with no exit. "You're telling me you can't access your own money?" Preston turned back to face me. "I'm telling you the trust controls disbursement. I'm one beneficiary. Natasha is the other. Barrett is the trustee. It takes all 3 signatures for anything over $5,000. "This is ridiculous." His voice hardened. "You're playing games with money that should help your daughter. The trust is helping her. That's exactly what it's doing." His jaw tightened. He grabbed the folder from the table. Didn't bother closing it. "You're hiding behind legal tricks. Eugene was good at those. Did he really set this up, or are you manipulating Natasha's inheritance?" I met his eyes. "You can ask Barrett if you'd like. He has all the documentation." Preston didn't say goodbye. He walked to the door and slammed it hard enough to rattle the frame. I moved to the window. Through the glass, I watched his silhouette in the Lexus, phone glowing, hands gesturing. He was calling someone, getting advice, making threats. I couldn't hear the words, but I understood the posture. This was escalation, not retreat. 3 minutes. He sat there 3 full minutes before starting the engine. The exit twist was clear. Preston wasn't angry and defeated. He was angry and planning. The pause in the car wasn't frustration cooling, it was strategy forming. I waited until his taillights disappeared down the drive, then speed-dialed Barrett. He answered on the first ring, his voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before. Anticipation mixed with something darker. What did he ask for? $80,000. Bridge loan. He had a contract prepared. Silence stretched 3 seconds. "That's the number we've been waiting for," Barrett said. He just disqualified himself. The line went dead before I could ask what he meant. I called Barrett back 3 times that night. He didn't answer. Whatever he meant about Preston disqualifying himself would have to wait. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m., a sound that didn't belong in the dark. I answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mom, do you remember Grandma's strawberry jam recipe?" Natasha's voice. Steady. Careful. Using the exact words we'd practiced 4 years ago. Level 1. Need to talk. Not urgent, but not nothing. Except it was nearly midnight, and she'd never activated the signal before. "I do," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Come over tomorrow and I'll show you." "Okay, thanks, Mom." 2 seconds of silence. Then the line went dead. The entry twist landed in my chest like a stone. 4 years of preparation. 4 years of practicing codes and scenarios. And this was the first time she'd actually used it. The theoretical had become real. I sat on the edge of my bed holding the phone. Rain started against the windows, steady and cold. January rain that would freeze by morning. Sleep wasn't possible. I went to the kitchen and brewed coffee at 3 a.m. Sat at the table, watching headlights pass on the county road. Each set of lights could be Natasha fleeing early. None of them turned into my drive. The code wasn't just words. It was a lifeline I'd thrown across 4 years of silence, hoping it would rot unused, hoping we'd joke about it someday. Remember when we had those ridiculous jam codes? Hoping Preston would leave or change, or Natasha would walk away before we needed emergency protocols. But here we were, strawberry jam at midnight. I replayed the call in my mind. Her voice had been controlled, not panicked. Grandma's jam, not Grandma Whitfield's. Level 1, not Level 3. She wasn't in immediate danger, but something had shifted badly enough to activate the system. 2 days ago, Preston had demanded money. Tonight, Natasha called in code. I wanted to call Barrett. I wanted to call the sheriff. I wanted to drive to Nashville and burn Preston's house down. Instead, I unlocked the front door and turned on the porch light. Dawn came gray and cold. The rain had stopped but left everything slick. I watched the road through the kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands. At exactly 8 a.m., Natasha's Honda appeared. She parked and sat motionless for a minute before getting out. When she walked up the gravel drive, her gait was slow, measured. Her hair hung loose on both sides of her face. She usually wore it pulled back. The right side was deliberately forward, covering her cheek. I opened the door before she reached it. "Come in, baby." She stepped inside and turned to close the door behind her. That's when I saw it. The movement shifted her hair and exposed the right side of her face. Dark purple bruise spreading from jaw to cheekbone. Fresh, maybe 12 hours old. The kind of bruise that comes from an open hand strike hard enough to snap the head sideways. "I fell," she said quietly. That's what I told him I'd say. The exit twist hit me like cold water. Preston hadn't just hit her, he'd coached her on the cover story. He was calculating his defense before she'd even left the house. "You don't have to say anything yet," I managed. "Just come inside." She moved past me into the living room, and as she did, I saw the second mark. Fingerprints wrapped around her left wrist, 5 dark ovals where he'd grabbed her. She followed my eyes downward and pulled her sleeve over it. "There's more," she whispered. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood, like she was steadying herself for impact. I guided her to the chair, poured water from the pitcher, set it in front of her. The bruise looked worse in full light, purple spreading toward her ear, darker at the center where his hand had landed hardest. "Tell me," I said. She drank the water first. Then she spoke. "The first time was October. We were arguing about money he wanted to borrow from the joint account for an investment. I said no. He hit me once, open hand across the face. Then he cried harder than I did, said it would never happen again. Bought me flowers the next day. Took me to dinner. I kept my face neutral. And the second time? November. I asked where he'd been at 2 in the morning. He said I provoked him, that I needed to watch my tone, that if I didn't question him constantly, he wouldn't lose his temper. The entry twist landed exactly where I felt it 3 times in 8 months. Textbook escalation pattern apology to blame shifting to silence. Preston wasn't losing control. He was refining his method. And 2 nights ago, I told him I'd seen the real estate letter in the mail, asked why his name was on correspondence about my mother's farm. She touched the bruise gently. This time, he didn't say anything at all. Just hit me twice. Walked out. Came back at 2 a.m. like nothing happened. That's what scares me most. He stopped pretending to be sorry. I wanted to hold her. Every cell in my body screamed to cross 3 feet of kitchen tile and wrap her in my arms. But comfort wasn't what she needed. She needed a plan. "Does he hit your son?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "Never. Just me." "Has he threatened worse?" "Not in words, but the way he looks at me sometimes." She stopped. "Yes." "Does he know you're here?" I told him I was going to the grocery store. He was still asleep when I left. I stood, moved to the counter, poured coffee into 2 mugs. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Inside, I was calculating timelines, evidence chains, custody law, protective orders. "Do you want out?" I asked. She looked up at me, eyes red but no longer crying. "I don't know how. The house is in his name. His family has money for lawyers. I have nothing." I asked if you want out, yes or no. The question hung in the air between us. 4 years of preparation compressed into one question. Do you want out? Everything else was just paperwork. Yes, she whispered. I set both coffee mugs on the table and picked up the phone. Dialed Barrett's number from memory. He answered on the first ring. Lorraine? Final phase, I said, watching Natasha's face. She's ready. Silence for 2 seconds. Then, how long? Soon, but it has to be exactly right. Natasha wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, watching me. She was starting to understand that my lack of shock wasn't denial. It was preparation. The exit twist settled over the kitchen like cold air. I'd been planning for this confession since the day I met Preston. The trust structure, Barrett's involvement, the documentation protocols. None of it was just about protecting assets. It was always about protecting her. Everything's in place? Barrett asked. Almost. We need one more thing from him. Understood. Call me when it happens. I hung up and sat down across from Natasha, pushed her coffee closer. What does exactly right mean? She asked. I watched steam rise from her mug, thought about the forged real estate letter, the demand for money, Mildred's notebook with 47 documented incidents, Preston's 3-minute phone call in his car after I refused the loan. It means he's going to give us one more thing, I said. And when he does, we take everything. Natasha stayed through the weekend. Saturday, we didn't talk about Preston. Sunday, she asked what we were waiting for. I told her we'd know it when we saw it. Monday morning at 7 a.m., Dale Morrison knocked on my door. Dale owned the bar in Collierville, a weathered 62-year-old with carpenter's hands and a memory like a steel trap. I'd taught his daughter in 2nd grade 30 years ago. He'd attended Eugene's funeral and brought me casseroles for a month after. He stood on my porch holding his phone. You need to see this. Recorded it Friday night. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table. He pressed play. Preston was 3 whiskeys deep when he started talking about the land. The video showed the bar's corner booth. Preston, with 2 men I didn't recognize. The angle was from behind the counter. Dale must have positioned his phone on the back shelf. The audio was clear. Preston's voice came through loud, loosened by alcohol. When the old lady dies, I inherit 3,000 Tennessee acres. Looked at the maps, worth at least $15 million. The entry twist hit me like ice water. He wasn't just exploiting Natasha or trying to steal from me now. He'd been planning for my death. Counting my land as his inheritance. One of the friends said something I couldn't make out. Then Preston again.
She seems broke, right? Lives in that old farmhouse, drives a 15-year-old truck. That's the disguise.
She's sitting on a fortune and doesn't even know it. I do. I paused the video. How drunk was he?
Drunk enough to mean it,
Dale said. I pressed play again. The scene continued. Preston ordered another round. Dale's voice on the recording. Another round. Preston barely looked at him. She acts poor, but I've done the research. Mineral rights alone are worth millions. 3,000 acres at current market rates, I'll be set for life. You want to know the difference between a predator and prey? Prey doesn't count money that isn't theirs yet. I watched Dale in the video wiping glasses behind the counter, his face carefully neutral. He'd known exactly who Preston was. Natasha's husband. My son-in-law, the man who'd been trying to borrow money and forge documents. And he'd recorded every word. The exit twist settled over me. Dale wasn't just a bar owner who happened to overhear something. He was my friend of 30 years who'd witnessed Preston self-incriminate and knew I needed to hear it. Preston had bragged about inheriting my fortune to a planted ally without realizing it. The video ran another minute. Preston laughed, gestured with his glass, said something about when nature takes its course that made my skin crawl. Then the recording ended. I can delete it if you want, Dale said quietly. Just thought you should know what he's saying. I stared at the blank screen. $15 million. He said it twice. Come in, I said, though we were already inside. I'll put coffee on. While the coffee brewed, I watched the video again. Preston's face in the bar light, laughing about my disguise, calculating my death like a retirement plan, talking about inheriting 3,000 acres of land that wasn't his, would never be his, that the trust structure specifically prevented him from touching. I watched it a 3rd time, memorizing every word. Dale sat across from me, waiting. When I finally looked up, he asked, "Want me to delete it?" I held his gaze. "Can you send it to my lawyer?" This was the one more thing. Dale sent the video to Barrett Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, Barrett called, asking me to drive to Nashville. Barrett's office was 12 floors above the Cumberland River, high enough that Nashville looked manageable. He spread everything across the conference table like a general reviewing battle maps. Trust documents on the left, the bar video playing silently on his tablet in the center, the forged real estate letter on the right, Mildred's notebook with 47 documented incidents, and something new, a forensics report with highlighted sections. Forensics pulled deleted texts from his phone records, Barrett said, tapping the report. He was researching elder manipulation before he ever asked you for money. I leaned forward. The highlighted text read, "Fastest way to get elderly people to sign legal documents." Sent 3 months before Preston showed up at my door with the loan contract. The entry twist landed like a hammer. The demand for money wasn't desperation or opportunism. It was premeditated financial elder abuse. He'd researched methods, planned the approach, tested whether I'd break. So the loan wasn't desperation, I said. It was a test run. Exactly, testing whether you'd break. You didn't. Barrett pulled up another document on his laptop, which means we have conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. Attempted fraud. Forgery of legal documents. And the bar recording showing motive and intent. I looked at the evidence spread before me. 4 years of careful construction. "What about Natasha?" I asked. The domestic violence adds family court leverage. Protective order. Emergency custody modification. Criminal charges if she wants to press them. Everything's drafted. We just need her ready. Eugene used to say, "You don't fight predators in the open. You build a trap so perfect, they walk in smiling." Barrett had built a cathedral. "Walk me through it," I said. Barrett stood, moved to the window overlooking the river. The trust protected the assets. Preston can't touch anything financial. We documented every contact he made with you, every attempt to access money or property. Dale at the bar was positioned perfectly. Mildred's surveillance log established his pattern of suspicious behavior. How many charges? Criminal forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. If Natasha files, we add domestic violence. That's criminal court. Then family court for protective order and custody. Then civil court, where we sue for damages, legal fees, emotional distress, Natasha's medical treatment. We hit him on 3 fronts simultaneously. I watched the river flow below, thinking about timing, about Natasha still recovering at my house, about Preston sitting in Nashville, unaware that 4 years of legal architecture was ready to collapse on him. "What does Natasha need to do?" I asked. "Just send the signal. Level 3. We handle everything else." The exit twist settled over me like cold clarity. I'd spent 4 years building this weapon, but I'd designed it to fire only when Natasha chose. This wasn't my revenge. This was her protection, her choice, her timing. The fortress was complete. She just had to walk inside. How fast can you move when she signals? Protective order filed within 2 hours. Criminal charges within 24. I have a judge on standby. I drove home on I-40 East, watching the winter sun turn the Tennessee hills red. Barrett's file sat secured in my trunk, phone in my purse, ringer on high. 4 years of planning compressed into waiting for 3 words from Natasha. Grandma Whitfield's jam recipe. Level 3. Emergency. I wanted to call her right then, tell her everything was ready, that she could choose this moment, that the trap was perfect. But that wasn't the deal. She had to choose this herself, when she was ready, not when I was ready. The gun was loaded. Natasha held the trigger. My phone rang as I crossed the county line. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought, what if it's her? What if level 3 is right now? I pulled onto the shoulder, hands shaking. Pressed the green button. "Ma'am, this is Deputy Collins with Shelby County Sheriff. Do you know Preston Harrington?" The deputy's call was nothing noise complaint at a bar 3 counties away. No action needed. So I hung up and went back to Eugene's diary. I'd kept it in the bedside drawer for 4 years without reading past the first few pages. Tonight felt like the right time to finish it. The last entry was dated 1 week before the tractor accident. Eugene's handwriting shaky from the cancer medication, but still legible. I worry most about the kind of man who learns to control through fear because he grew up afraid. If I'm not here to recognize him, you do it for me. You always see things in children I miss. The entry twist landed like Eugene was sitting beside me. He'd identified Preston's profile 4 years before I even met him. He'd known the threat pattern, warned me about it, trusted me to recognize it when it appeared. He knew. 4 years dead, and he still knew. Tucked in the back of the diary was a sealed envelope marked, "Open when Natasha needs." I tore it carefully. Inside a pre-signed blank check from Eugene's account dated 2 weeks before his death, and a note in his shaky script. "Use when necessary. I trust your judgment. Protect our girl." I set the check and diary on the nightstand, lamplight making shadows on the pages. Eugene had built the foundation. Barrett had built the walls. I'd built the roof. The fortress was complete. My phone rang at 11:23 p.m. I answered on the first ring. "Mom?" Natasha's voice, barely a whisper. "Do you remember Grandpa's strawberry jam recipe?" The exit twist hit me like electricity, not Grandma's recipe. Grandpa's, Eugene's mother, not mine. Level 3, the emergency code. She'd remembered it perfectly, even under attack, turning the worst moment into strategic activation. Behind her whisper, I heard the crash. Not furniture. It was a body hitting a wall. Male voice shouting, words I couldn't make out. Glass breaking, Natasha's breath sharp and fast. I kept my voice calm, giving her an anchor. "I do, honey. Come home tomorrow morning." "Okay." Another crash. "Love you, Mom." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of the bed for 3 seconds. Eugene's diary beside me, phone in my hand. 4 years of preparation compressed into this moment. I called Barrett. He answered before the second ring. "Now," I said. "On it." The line went dead. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Domestic violence in progress. 2847 Maple Ridge Drive, Nashville. Female victim. I have audio evidence and I'm on my way there now. "Ma'am, are you the victim?" "I'm the mother. My daughter activated our emergency protocol. She's in immediate danger." "Police are being dispatched now. Do not enter the residence yourself." "Understood." I hung up, put on my coat, grabbed my keys and Eugene's diary. Walked to the truck in darkness, engine starting on the first turn. 4 years of chess against an opponent who thought he was playing alone. Checkmate started the moment Natasha said Grandpa. The county road stretched empty ahead. No other headlights. I pressed the accelerator. 50 became 60, became 70. After years of waiting, when the moment came, I didn't shake, just cold. Focused. My phone lit up on the passenger seat, text from Barrett. "Police dispatched, restraining order filed electronically. Custody motion ready for filing, 8 a.m. It's happening." I typed back with one hand. Eyes on the road. On my way. The trap had sprung. Everything Barrett had prepared, the criminal charges, the protective order, the custody filing. The evidence file was moving into the system now. Police were already en route to Natasha's house. By morning, Preston would wake up to a legal reality that had been built around him for 4 years while he counted my land and planned my death. The road stretched black ahead. No moon. Just my headlights cutting through January darkness and the white line pulling me toward Nashville. Eugene's diary sat on the passenger seat beside my phone. His last words, "Protect our girl." I was driving 80 now, hands steady on the wheel. Rain started at the county line, turning the road into a black mirror. I kept the 911 dispatcher on the line, phone pressed between ear and shoulder while both hands gripped the wheel. 70 miles per hour on wet asphalt, wipers beating steady rhythm. "What is your relationship to the victim?" the dispatcher asked. "I'm her mother. My attorney, Barrett Whitfield, has documentation of ongoing domestic abuse and filed legal protective measures tonight. Officers can contact him directly for case background." I read Barrett's phone number from memory, clear and precise. The entry twist landed as I spoke. The legal case was already so integrated with law enforcement that police could call the attorney for verification before they even arrived. 4 years of preparation meant law enforcement wasn't starting from zero. They were stepping into an existing case file. Ma'am, officers are en route to 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. ETA 8 minutes. Are you approaching the location? Yes, I'll be there in 6. Please wait outside for officers. Do not enter the residence. Is the victim able to exit on her own? I don't know. She called 20 minutes ago using our emergency code. Background sounds indicated active violence. Stay on the line with me, ma'am. My GPS showed 2 miles remaining. Nashville suburbs stretched dark and wet, streetlights making halos in the rain. Maple Ridge was a new development. Big houses, 2-car garages. The kind of neighborhood where people closed their blinds and ignored screaming. My daughter was in that house. 6 minutes felt like 6 hours. I gripped the steering wheel and counted seconds. The dispatcher was saying something about staying in my vehicle, about letting officers handle the situation, about my safety. I made affirmative sounds without committing to anything. Please wait outside for officers, she repeated. Do not enter the residence. I will wait outside, I said. True enough, I hadn't said I'd wait in the truck. Stay on the line with me, ma'am. I turned onto Maple Ridge Drive and hung up. The house at 2847 was lit up like a stadium. Every window blazing, lights spilling onto the lawn, the driveway, the street. Preston's Lexus parked at an angle like he'd arrived in a hurry. I killed my headlights and coasted the truck across the street into a neighbor's driveway, parking in shadow under their oak tree. Engine running, facing the house. Through the rain and my closed windows, I could hear screaming. Police ETA, 4 minutes. Anything can happen in 4 minutes. I rolled down my window 2 inches. The screaming got louder. Not words, just rage. The screaming wasn't Natasha. It was Preston. Rage, not pain. He was in complete loss of control. I'd promised to wait outside. I was outside. Glass shattered. Not a cup. A window. The living room window, second from the left. Something large and dark flew through it onto the front lawn. A lamp. Movement inside shadows crossing the lit windows. One shadow smaller, moving fast. One shadow larger, following. I put my hand on the door handle. Police ETA, 3 minutes. Another crash from inside. More screaming. A child crying, now high-pitched, terrified. My door was open before I consciously decided. 1 foot on wet asphalt. Then the front door flew open. Natasha stumbled onto the porch, barefoot, wearing sweatpants and a torn t-shirt. She was holding Beckett against her chest. He was crying, face buried in her shoulder. She took 2 steps toward the yard. Preston appeared in the doorway behind her, backlit by the house lights, arm raised, hand closed into fist. I was halfway across the street when headlights swept over all of us. Cruiser, no siren, moving fast. The cruiser stopped in the middle of the street. Doors opening. But in the 90 seconds before that, before Natasha fled onto the porch, before the police lights swept everything, I watched through the window. I could see everything. Living room, shattered glass across the floor, Preston backing Natasha against the wall, finger jabbing toward her face. She was still wearing the torn t-shirt from when I'd seen her that morning. Blood on her lip. New bruise forming on her cheek, darker than the old one. She clutched something against her chest. Her phone. The entry twist landed as I realized she'd kept the line open. The 911 call had gone through before he noticed. Emergency services were recording everything, every word, every crash, every threat. The phone was evidence and witness. Preston saw it. His face changed. He lunged forward, ripped the phone from her hands, threw it against the wall. The screen shattered. Plastic scattered across hardwood. In the background. On the stairs. Beckett sat frozen, 5 years old, watching his father destroy his mother. 60 seconds. Police had said 8 minutes. How many had passed? My hand was on the door handle. Preston was shouting. I couldn't hear words through the window and rain, just rage. Natasha's mouth moved, trying to calm him. Probably. The thing abuse victims learn to do: make themselves smaller, apologize for existing. He shoved her. She stumbled back against the wall, arms up protecting her face. Every cell in my body screamed to run across that street, through that door, between them. Keys gripped in my fist, hard enough the metal cut into the palm. 4 years of planning versus 4 seconds of mother instinct. You think revenge is hot. It's not. It's ice-cold calculation while your daughter is 3 seconds from a closed fist and you're sitting still because going in now breaks everything. The exit twist crushed down on me like physical weight. The hardest thing I'd ever done wasn't building the 4-year legal trap, wasn't wading through Preston's escalation, wasn't discovering Eugene dead or surviving 32 years of abuse myself. It was standing still for 90 seconds watching my daughter in immediate danger while trusting the plan. Eugene's voice in my head: trust the trap. Going in breaks everything. Police needed to see this. Document it. Arrest him for it. If I went in now, he'd claim I attacked him. That Natasha called me for help with a marital disagreement. That I was interfering. He'd walk free tomorrow with a restraining order against me. If I waited 90 seconds, he was done forever. 70 seconds. Preston moved closer to Natasha, backing her into the corner where she couldn't escape. His body language was predatory. Hunting. 50 seconds. On the stairs. Beckett was crying now. Silent crying. The kind children learn when making noise makes it worse. 40 seconds. Preston's arm pulled back. Fist closed. Everything slowed. Natasha flinched, turned her face away, raised her forearm to protect her head. Defensive posture. The one that would photograph well for evidence. 30 seconds. My door was opening. I couldn't sit anymore. Couldn't watch anymore. Plan or no plan, legal strategy or not, I was crossing that street. Then sirens. Distant but growing, unmistakable. Preston froze mid-motion, head turning toward the street. His fist stayed raised, but his body went still, listening. The sirens weren't rescue. They were checkmate. I exhaled for the first time since cutting my engine. White-knuckle grip on steering wheel, releasing. Palm bleeding where keys had cut. 93 seconds. Felt like 90 years. Red and blue lights swept the house, painting everything in alternating colors. Natasha's face went red, then blue, then red again. Preston dropped his arm, turned toward the window. For 1 second, his eyes locked with mine across the street. He knew. Knew I'd orchestrated this. Knew I'd been waiting. Knew the trap had just closed around him. I didn't look away. The first officer through the door had his hand on his holster. Officer Duncan, mid-40s, Metro Nashville Police. 15 years on his badge swept the room with practiced eyes. Glass on the floor. Broken lamp on the lawn. Natasha against the wall with blood on her lip. His partner, Officer Martinez. Younger and alert, moved to secure Preston. I followed them inside, staying by the door. Witness, not participant. Not yet. Preston's face shifted the instant he saw the uniforms. Panic to calculation in half a second. He pointed at me. Officer, my mother-in-law has been stalking us for months. She's mentally unstable. She's threatened us. She's trying to take my wife's inheritance. The entry twist landed exactly as I'd known it would. Preston's first instinct wasn't defense. It was offense. Attack the witness. Discredit before they could assess. Classic abuser playbook. Officer Duncan raised one hand. Sir, step back. Ma'am, are you injured? He was looking at Natasha. She opened her mouth, closed it, then just pointed at the floor. The shattered phone lay in 3 pieces near the wall where Preston had thrown it. She was calling her crazy mother to lie about me, Preston said, to make up stories, to steal from me. Sir, Officer Duncan's voice went flat. I need you to stop talking and step back. Officer Martinez crouched near the phone, pulled a pen from his pocket, used it to turn the largest piece over. The screen was cracked spiderwebbed, but still glowing. He leaned closer. Phone still recording, he said. Active 911 call. Timer showing 41 minutes, 17 seconds. The exit twist crashed over the room like cold water the phone Preston threw to destroy Natasha's lifeline to silence her. to cut her off from help, had been recording the entire time. Every word he'd shouted, every threat he'd made, every glass he'd thrown. The violent act he thought eliminated evidence had actually preserved it perfectly. He'd spent 4 years building a cage around Natasha. Took 41 minutes to lock himself inside it. Preston went pale. She was calling her mother to... Officer Duncan picked up the phone carefully, using only 2 fingers. "Sir, this is evidence now. I need you to stop talking." Before I reveal what that 41-minute recording captured, comment A, if Preston knew he was being recorded, or B, if he had no idea. And tell me why in 5 words. Because this changes everything. Quick note, what follows contains fictionalized details for narrative impact. If you'd rather not continue, you can stop here. Officer Duncan tapped the screen, pulled up the recording app. Timer still running. 42:03. He scrolled back, pressed play, volume up. Preston's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but clear. "You think you can call anyone? You think anyone will help you? I will destroy you." Crash. The sound of the phone hitting the wall. The recording didn't stop. It kept going. Preston's voice continued. "Your mother's land is mine. When she dies, I inherit everything, and there's nothing you can do." Another crash, glass breaking. Natasha's voice. "Please stop." Preston's voice. "Shut up. Just shut up." Officer Duncan stopped the playback. Looked at the shattered phone. Looked at the broken glass on the floor. Looked at Natasha's face. Looked at Preston. The recording was still running. Still capturing. Even now. "Sir," Officer Duncan said, "you're under arrest for domestic assault. You have the right to remain silent." "This is insane!" Preston's voice cracked. "She set me up. Her mother set me up." "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." Officer Martinez moved behind Preston, hand on his cuffs. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." As Martinez pulled Preston's wrists behind his back, the metal cuffs clicking into place, Preston looked at me across the room. Not rage anymore. Recognition. He finally understood. The trust structure, the 4 years, Barrett, the bar recording, Mildred's notebook, tonight. All of it. "You planned this," he whispered. The coffee tasted like burnt aluminum. But I drank it anyway, because my hands needed something to hold. Shelby County Sheriff's Station. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Plastic chairs bolted to tile floor. Preston was 3 rooms away being processed. Natasha was in the interview room with Detective Valerie Cross, a 20-year veteran who'd handled more domestic violence cases than anyone in the county. I watched through the glass partition. Couldn't hear words, just saw Natasha's mouth moving. Detective Cross taking notes. Natasha's hands trembled when she touched her face, showing where the bruises were. "When did the physical violence start?" Detective Cross asked when I finally entered the room at her signal. Natasha looked at me, then back at the detective. "October 2024. First time he cried after. Bought me flowers. Said it would never happen again. By January, he didn't apologize anymore." "Did anyone else know what was happening?" Natasha shook her head. "No, I didn't tell anyone." Detective Cross looked at me. "Mrs. Caldwell, did you know this was happening?" I set my coffee cup down, opened my purse, pulled out the sealed manila envelope I'd prepared 3 months ago. Updated last week, sealed yesterday. Handed it across the table. "I've known for 2 years." The entry twist landed as Detective Cross opened the envelope and 47 pages spilled across the table. Mildred Graves' neighbor observation log documenting Preston's suspicious patterns for 2 years. Forensics report on Preston's deleted texts researching elder manipulation. Copies of the forged real estate letter. Bar recording transcript with timestamps. Complete phone log of my consultations with Barrett Whitfield dating back to 2022. Civilian surveillance. Coordinated documentation. Evidence collected long before the first assault. Before Natasha quit teaching. Before any visible signs. Detective Cross flipped through pages, expression shifting from professional to impressed.
"When did you prepare this?"
When I needed to. I'd built Natasha a fortress. Forgot to ask if she wanted to live in a construction zone for 4 years first. This is the most thorough civilian documentation I've seen in 20 years, Detective Cross said. I still reading. Mildred's log entries, Preston's 2 a.m. departures, the silver Honda, his drunken confession about inheriting my land. You documented everything, everything I could. Natasha was staring at me, not crying, not thanking, just staring. 2 years. Her voice was flat. I met her eyes. I needed it to be airtight. If we moved too early, I stopped. There was no good ending to that sentence. If we moved too early, Preston walks free tomorrow. If we moved too early, he gets custody. If we moved too early, you go back to him, and I've shown my hand with nothing to protect you. But the truth underneath all those reasons, I chose the fortress over her freedom. I chose legal victory over her voice. I made decisions about her life without asking her. The detective was impressed. Natasha was silent. I'd won the war and maybe lost my daughter. Detective Cross made notes, checked timestamps, cross-referenced dates. At 2:47 a.m., she called the prosecutor's office, left a detailed message about the evidence package and Preston's arrest. Natasha sat across from me the whole time, watching, her expression shifting from relief to something else. Something harder. Realization settling in while she'd been living through escalating abuse. Losing her job, cutting her hair, surviving 3 assaults I'd been documenting. Building a case. Coordinating with Barrett and Mildred and Dale, planning her rescue without telling her there was a plan. She'd felt alone. She hadn't been alone, but she'd felt it. And maybe that was the same thing. Detective Cross closed the file and looked at both of us. Mrs. Caldwell, I need to ask, did you ever consider just telling Natasha about the evidence? Letting her decide when to leave? I opened my mouth, closed it. Natasha was staring at me, waiting. I had no good answer. The knock came at 7 Wednesday morning, same as always, except this time it wasn't a phone call. I'd left the sheriff's station at 4 a.m. with no answers for Natasha. Drove her and Beckett back to my house. Watched her tuck him into the guest bed, still wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. She'd gone to the other bedroom without speaking to me. Now I opened the door to find Barrett Whitfield on my porch. First time in 4 years he'd come to the house instead of calling. Suit jacket, briefcase, exhaustion around his eyes that matched mine. We need to talk, he said. All 3 of us. Natasha appeared from the kitchen holding a coffee mug, still wearing yesterday's torn shirt. She stopped when she saw the unfamiliar man in the doorway. Barrett stepped inside, extended his hand professionally. Mrs. Harrington, I'm Barrett Whitfield. We've never met, but I've been working with your mother for some time. Natasha didn't take his hand, just stared at him. Then at me. Who is he? She asked. My attorney. She set her coffee mug down on the side table. Her face changed. Recognition dawning. The entry twist landed as she spoke. He's the Wednesday 7 a.m. call, isn't he? The one you always take on the porch? I'd taken those calls for 4 years, same time every week, walking outside so Natasha wouldn't hear when she visited. Speaking quietly, never explaining who or why. Yes, I said. Natasha looked at Barrett, then back at me. For how long? 4 years. Silence stretched between us, Natasha processing the timeline. 4 years of Wednesday mornings. 4 years of secret planning. 4 years of phone calls she'd heard but never questioned. I'd heard her on the phone every Wednesday for 4 years. Same time, same quiet voice walking onto the porch. Never asked who. Maybe I didn't want to know someone was helping when I couldn't help myself. Maybe I was afraid the answer would make me feel more alone. You did all this for 4 years and never told me. I met her eyes, held them. You didn't tell me for 4 years either. The words hung in the air between us. Natasha's expression shifted, anger bleeding into something else, recognition. We'd both kept devastating secrets, both suffered alone. Both had reasons we thought were good enough. She was silent for 10 seconds. Then, yeah, we did. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Painful, mirror image understanding. How do you apologize for saving someone without their permission? How do you apologize for not asking for help when you needed it? We'd both done what we thought we had to do. We'd both been wrong in ways that hurt. Barrett cleared his throat, set his briefcase on the kitchen table, opened it, and pulled out a thick file. "We have 11 days, he said, turning the file so we could both see. Red circle around a date, February 10th, 2025. Before his forged real estate deal deadline. Trial must start before then, or he profits despite the arrest. 11 days, January 30th to February 10th. Less than 2 weeks to bring a criminal case to trial. Secure conviction. Prevent Preston from closing a fraudulent deal worth millions." Barrett spread documents across my kitchen table. The forged real estate letter from Memphis Premium Properties. Purchase agreement. Closing date. Preston's signature as authorized representative. And at the bottom, proposed sale price of $2.8 million for 800 acres. "If he makes bail and closes this deal before trial," Barrett said, "he walks away with $2.8 million from selling land he doesn't own." Natasha leaned forward, looking at the signature. Preston's handwriting, his bold, confident loops. Then she looked at the property description, the acreage, the location. She looked at me. "Whose land?" "Mine," I said. "The land is mine." Natasha stared at the forged documents spread across my kitchen table. Preston's signature authorizing the sale of my 800 acres, the property he'd planned to inherit when I died, selling it before I was even gone. 3 days later. Preston looked reasonable standing on my porch. No rage, no threats. Just a man in business casual trying to solve a problem. The entry twist landed immediately. He'd been released on bail. 3 days after domestic violence arrest, recorded 911 call, witness testimony, physical evidence, and he was already out, already maneuvering. Either weak prosecution or his legal team was better than Barrett anticipated. "We can resolve this without destroying the family," Preston said. His voice was measured, calm. "I made mistakes, but so did you with your interference. We both have things we'd rather not air in court." I stayed in the doorway, didn't invite him in. "What do you want?" "Convince Natasha to drop the charges. I'll get counseling. We'll work it out. The family stays together." He paused. "In exchange, I won't pursue legal action about the land dispute. Everyone wins." Land dispute. As if forging my power of attorney was a paperwork disagreement. "Have you hired a lawyer?" I asked. "Brennan and Associates in Memphis. Best firm money can buy." Confidence returned to his voice. "Thomas Brennan, founding partner. 28 years practicing law. He's very good." I went still for exactly 1 second. Thomas Brennan. "You know him. Which Brennan Thomas or his son?" "Thomas, the founding partner." "Why?" I met his eyes. "I paid his law school tuition, $47,000 over 4 years. He graduated 1999. The exit twist crashed over Preston's face like cold water. His confident expression cracked. Color drained from his cheeks. "You what?" "Eugene's Foundation. Anonymous scholarship for promising students from rural Tennessee." Thomas Brennan was one of 17 recipients between 1995 and 2010. "You want to know how to beat someone? Plant trees 25 years before you need the shade." Preston stared at me. "How many people do you have?" "Wrong question. Should have asked, how long have you been planting?" "I don't have anyone," I said. "I helped people who needed help. Turns out, when you do that for 30 years, you build something stronger than a network. You build a community." Preston backed down my porch steps, stumbled slightly on the gravel. "This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." I watched his Lexus disappear down the drive. Then I went inside and waited. The call came at 9:47 p.m., Memphis area code. I answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Caldwell." Male voice, professional but shaken. "This is Thomas Brennan. We've never spoken directly." "Hello, Thomas. You paid for my education." Long silence. I didn't make the connection until I was reviewing client intake forms tonight against my old student loan records. The foundation name was different, but the amounts matched. Eugene's Foundation used several administrative names for different programs. But yes, you were a good student who needed help. Another silence. Then, Mrs. Caldwell, I need to discuss an ethical conflict. Preston Harrington retained my firm 3 days ago. I didn't know he was your son-in-law. Didn't know about the domestic violence case or the property fraud allegations or your involvement until tonight. I understand. I have to withdraw from his case immediately. A lawyer cannot represent a client against someone to whom they owe a significant professional debt. The ethics are clear. When will you notify him? Tomorrow morning, first thing. After he hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen holding the phone. Preston had 11 days to close the forged land deal. Now had zero legal representation. Tomorrow he'd receive notice that his best firm, Money Can Buy, just withdrew. Barrett's words echoed, "Trial must start before February 10th. 10 days left." The withdrawal letter arrived by courier at 9 a.m., addressed to Preston Harrington, with copy to prosecuting attorney. I stood in my kitchen reading the formal language while coffee cooled in my mug. Brennan and Associates withdrawing representation effective immediately. Reason cited? Conflict of interest pursuant to Rule 1.7 of Professional Conduct. The entry twist was in what the letter didn't say, no explanation of the Lorraine connection. No mention of the scholarship or Eugene's foundation. Just clean. Professional withdrawal, maintaining attorney-client confidentiality while still executing the strategic disruption perfectly. Barrett called 20 minutes later. Brennan withdrew. Clean, professional, no details disclosed. Preston got his copy this morning. How long does Preston have? 10 days to the real estate closing deadline. He'll need a lawyer familiar with both the forgery case and the domestic violence charges by then. Nearly impossible on that timeline. I hung up and stared at the February calendar on my wall. Red circle around the 10th. 10 days for Preston to scramble. 10 days for the trap to close completely. Except it didn't work that way. 1 week later, 3 days before the deadline, I found Natasha sitting in the garden behind my house, staring at her phone. "He texted," she said without looking up. I sat beside her on the wooden bench Eugene had built in 1998. "What did he say?" She handed me the phone. Preston's message filled the screen. "I know I messed up. I'm getting real help this time. Real therapy. Beckett needs his father. We can fix this together. Please. Tasha. Second chance." I handed the phone back. "Is this the first time he's promised change?" "Fourth." Her voice was flat. I know what this is, but I'm so tired. Mom!" The exit twist landed like a stone in my chest. I want to drop the charges. 4 years of planning, 47 pages of evidence, Mildred's surveillance log, bar recordings, forensics reports, Barrett's legal architecture, all of it built to trap Preston in an inescapable cage. I'd spent 4 years building that cage. Didn't account for the door being left open by the person I was trying to save. "Do you want to stop because you believe him?" I asked quietly. "Or because you're exhausted?" Natasha started crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears running down her face. "Because I'm exhausted." I took her hand. "I know, baby. He says Beckett needs his father. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm being selfish keeping them apart." "Stop." I squeezed her hand gently. "You're not selfish. You're tired. That's what he's counting on. That's what they always count on. But what if he really changes this time? Has he changed the other 3 times? She shook her head. "If you stop now, next year you'll be more exhausted," I said. "And he'll be smarter about covering the bruises, better at hiding the control. You'll be right back here, except with less strength to leave." You can't force someone to save themselves. You can only build the life raft and wait for them to climb in. We sat in the garden until dusk. Then I walked her inside to her old bedroom, the one with faded wallpaper and her high school trophies still on the shelf. She lay down fully clothed and fell asleep at 8 p.m. like a child exhausted from crying. I sat beside the bed watching her sleep, the same way I'd watched her when she was 4 with fever, when she was 8 with nightmares, when she was 17, heartbroken over her first breakup. Some things don't change. Mothers watch, daughters sleep, the world keeps turning. In the morning, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. New text from Preston. I saw the preview light up the screen. "I hired a new lawyer. She says we can make this all go away. Please, Tasha, for Beckett. 3 days until February 10th. 3 days until he tried to close the forged land deal, and Natasha was wavering. Natasha didn't drop the charges. On the morning of February 7th, 3 days before the deadline, she walked into Barrett's office and signed the statement reaffirming her testimony. 2 days later, we sat in court. The courtroom smelled like old oak and floor polish, the kind of permanence that made lies harder to sustain. Judge Carolyn Meacham entered 23 years on the bench, silver hair pulled back severe, reading glasses on a chain. The bailiff called court to order. Everyone stood. I felt Natasha's hand find mine for 3 seconds before we sat. Lorraine and Natasha behind the prosecution table with Barrett. Preston across the aisle with his new attorney, a woman in her 40s, burgundy suit, files stacked unevenly in front of her. Rachel Dunham, small Memphis firm. Barrett had researched her 8 years practicing mostly misdemeanors, never handled a case this complex. The entry twist was visible in her posture. She'd been hired 6 days ago. Files barely organized, no time to prepare. Preston wore a new suit, fresh haircut, posture straight. He wouldn't look at Natasha. His parents sat in the back row, with Beckett between them. 5 years old, in khakis and a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit. This is a preliminary hearing for the state versus Preston James Harrington, Judge Meacham said. Counselors, are we ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor. Rachel Dunham stood. The defense is ready. David Fletcher, Assistant District Attorney, stood beside Barrett. The state is ready, Your Honor. Judge Meacham nodded. Defense may present opening statement. Dunham stood, smoothed her jacket, approached the bench. Standard playbook, rush delivery. Your Honor, Mr. Harrington is a devoted father and husband, targeted by a woman who cannot accept her daughter's independence. She gestured toward me without looking. Mrs. Caldwell has used her considerable resources to orchestrate a legal nightmare for a man whose only mistake was marrying into her family. I kept my face neutral. Natasha's hand tightened on the armrest. This case is about control. Your Honor, not abuse, control. Mrs. Caldwell's control over her daughter's life, her daughter's marriage, her daughter's choices. Mr. Harrington attempted to protect family assets, and for that, he's been accused of fraud. He had an argument with his wife, and for that, he's been accused of assault. Dunham was painting Preston as a victim. Fletcher was about to show them the architect's blueprint. The defense will show, Dunham continued, that this prosecution is the culmination of years of interference and manipulation by a controlling mother who cannot let her daughter go. She sat down, files shifting under her hands. Judge Meacham looked at Fletcher. Prosecution? David Fletcher stood, nodded to Barrett, pressed a button on the laptop in front of them. The projection screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed slightly. Your Honor, Fletcher said, the state will show this is not a controlling mother. This is a 4-year pattern of premeditated financial fraud and domestic abuse. The diagram filled the screen. Eugene's 2020 trust structure at the center, lines connecting to Lorraine's protected assets. Preston's 2022 forgery attempt, branching left. The deleted texts researching elderly manipulation. The bar recording transcript. The attempted land sale for $2.8 million. Mildred's 2-year surveillance log. Barrett's consultation timeline. Every connection mapped, with dates, dollar amounts, witnesses, evidence. The exit twist landed visually the entire 4-year scheme projected for the courtroom to see. No ambiguity. No room for interpretation. Just connections drawn in clean lines, showing exactly what Preston had done and when. Mr. Harrington didn't just assault his wife, Fletcher said. He attempted to steal $2, $8 million through forged documents while researching how to manipulate elderly victims. This is not a family dispute. This is calculated fraud and domestic violence. The wall clock ticked. No one coughed. No one shifted. The diagram spoke louder than any witness. Even Dunham stopped shuffling her papers. Preston stared at the screen, face draining of color as the diagram showed every connection the trust Eugene built, the forgery he created, the texts he deleted, the land he tried to steal. His eyes found mine across the courtroom. For the first time in 4 years, I saw fear. I didn't look away. Let him see that I knew. Let him see that I'd always known. The next slide was just numbers. But numbers have a way of changing everything. Barrett advanced the presentation. Asset breakdown filled the screen in clean columns. The assets Mr. Harrington attempted to access through forgery, Fletcher said, standing beside the projection. Total $45 million. 3,000 acres of Tennessee farmland. $12 million current valuation. Lithium mining royalties from 2018 geological survey and contracted extraction. $28 million over remaining 30-year term. Stock portfolio and liquid assets. $5 million. The entry twist landed in the courtroom like a physical weight. Eugene's shabby farmhouse sat on land worth millions. Not from farming, but from mineral deposits below. The poverty wasn't real. The wealth was just hidden underground. All protected in irrevocable trust since 2020, Barrett said, highlighting Eugene's signature at the bottom of the trust documents. 2 years before Mr. Harrington met Natasha Caldwell, legally untouchable by external parties, including spouses, creditors, or heirs until specific conditions are met. Preston's face went from fear to confusion to something worse. Comprehension. The defendant's deleted texts, Fletcher continued, show he researched trust-breaking strategies for 18 months, consulted with 3 separate attorneys about challenging irrevocable trusts, all before the first documented assault. Preston stared at the screen, mouth open, processing. He'd been clawing at a vault door that was actually painted on a wall. The money existed, the access never did. He whispered something to Rachel Dunham. Her face went pale. She shook her head, put her hand on his arm. His voice rose, not quite shouting, but loud enough to carry. You have how much? Judge Meacham looked up sharply. You live in a farmhouse. Preston was staring at me now, ignoring his lawyer. You drive a 20-year-old truck. Your house is... The gavel came down. Mr. Harrington, you may not speak during evidence presentation. Ms. Dunham, control your client. Rachel Dunham pulled at his sleeve. Preston, please. Your Honor, Dunham said, voice quiet, defeated. I apologize. My client is surprised by the disclosure. This is a courtroom, not a discussion forum. Judge Meacham's voice was ice. Mr. Harrington will remain silent or be removed. Do we understand each other? Preston sat back in his chair. Papers slipped from Dunham's hands to the floor. No one picked them up. I watched his face cycle through emotions too fast to name. Shock, rage, grief, and finally the worst one, comprehension. The exit twist settled over him like ash. He'd spent 4 years torturing my daughter. Forging documents, researching elder manipulation, planning fraud, all to access money that was legally impossible for him to ever touch. Not in his lifetime, not with 1,000 forged signatures, not if I died tomorrow and left it all uncontested. Eugene had built a fortress. Preston spent 4 years battering a wall that had no door. How do you explain to a man that he tortured his wife for 4 years over money he could never have, not in a lifetime, not with 1,000 forged signatures, that every scheme he planned was doomed before it started, that the wealth existed, but the access was a mirage? You don't explain. You just watch the truth land. This wasn't victory. This was just truth. Truth he'd spent 4 years trying to reach without knowing it existed. Preston stood up. Rachel Dunham grabbed his arm, but he shook her off, turned to face me directly across the courtroom. You let me... His voice cracked. You watched me for 4 years and never said... Judge Meacham's gavel came down 3 times. Hard. Mr. Harrington, sit down or you will be removed from this courtroom. Preston sat down. Rachel Dunham whispered frantically in his ear. His hands shook. Judge Meacham gave him 30 seconds to compose himself, then nodded to the prosecution. Call your next witness. The prosecutor called Mildred Graves, and every head in the courtroom turned to watch an 80-year-old woman in a powder blue cardigan walk to the stand. She moved slowly but steadily, one hand on the railing. The bailiff held out the Bible. Mildred placed her right hand on it, raised her left. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. She settled into the witness chair, adjusted her reading glasses, smoothed her cardigan. Her hands were steady. "Ms. Graves," Fletcher began, "how long have you known Mrs. Caldwell?" 30 years. Taught her daughter in 2nd grade. Baked her a casserole when Eugene died. "And where do you live in relation to Mrs. Caldwell's property?" "Across the county road, clear sightline to her driveway from my kitchen window." "Did you observe Mr. Harrington's visits to Mrs. Caldwell's property?" Mildred reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small spiral notebook. Blue cover, worn edges, pages filled with careful handwriting. The entry twist landed as she held it up 47 times. I kept notes. 47 documented entries, not casual observation. Systematic civilian surveillance spanning 2 years, complete with dates, times, license plate numbers, behavioral observations. Evidence created by an elementary school teacher who knew how to keep records. "May I see that notebook?" Fletcher asked. Mildred handed it over. Fletcher showed it to the judge, then to the jury. Pages of neat script visible even from the gallery. "Your witness," Fletcher said to Rachel Dunham. Dunham stood, approached the stand. Her strategy was visible before she opened her mouth. "Ms. Graves, you're how old?" 80. 80 years old. "And you're certain these observations are accurate after—" Mildred looked directly at her, then at the jury. "I'm 80 years old. I taught elementary school for 40 years. Tracked attendance, behavior, parent meetings for hundreds of students. I know how to keep records." "You think being 80 means invisible, means incompetent. Old women see everything. We just wait for the right moment to say so." Soft laughter rippled through the courtroom. Judge Meacham's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "Yes, but memory at that age," Dunham pressed. Mildred tilted her head. "My memory works fine, dear. Do you need me to spell my name?" More laughter. Dunham's face flushed. The exit twist was complete. The ageist attack had backfired, making Mildred more credible, more sympathetic. The jury was leaning forward now. Engaged. Dunham retreated. No further questions. Fletcher stood for redirect. "Ms. Graves, would you read a few entries for the court?" Mildred opened her notebook. Her teacher voice came out clear and steady. October 3, 2024. Subject arrived 10:22 a.m., left 10:34 a.m., slammed car door. Mrs. Caldwell stood on porch watching him leave. November 19, 2024. Subject arrived 4:15 p.m., raised voice audible from road, left 4:51 p.m. December 18, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Subject arrived, stayed 14 minutes, left fast enough to spray gravel. She continued. Dates, times, observations. Each entry precise. Each entry damning. 47 entries. A grandmother with a notebook had documented what police might have missed. Dunham stopped objecting. There was nothing to object to, just facts, recorded in real time by a woman who'd spent 40 years documenting children's behavior. 47 entries total? Fletcher asked. 47. Would have been more, but I had cataract surgery in March. Mildred closed her notebook. Preston turned in his seat to stare at Lorraine. His expression shifted from shock to something colder. Recognition. The trap wasn't just Barrett, wasn't just police and judges. It was neighbors keeping notebooks, bar owners recording conversations, lawyers she'd funded decades ago facing ethical conflicts. An entire invisible network built over 30 years of helping people, teaching children, being present in the community. Rachel Dunham sat down without recross. She had nothing left. Judge Meacham turned to Preston. "Mr. Harrington, before I rule, do you have anything you wish to say?" Preston's voice had that reasonable tone abusers perfect over years, the one that makes victims question their own reality. He stood slowly, hands open, posture non-threatening. Rachel Dunham watched him, knowing this was all they had left. "Your Honor," Preston began, voice calm and measured. "My mother-in-law has used her wealth to control my wife her entire life." The entry twist unfolded in his carefully chosen words, one final manipulation attempt, reframing the entire narrative to cast himself as victim of a controlling, wealthy matriarch. "This case isn't about abuse," he continued. "It's about a woman who cannot accept her daughter's independence from her control. I tried to give Natasha autonomy. I tried to help her build a life separate from her mother's interference. He gestured toward the evidence screen. Everything you've seen today, the trust, the evidence, the witnesses, it's all her way of separating Natasha from me, because I'm the one person who encouraged my wife to make her own decisions. The courtroom was silent, the same reasonable tone he'd used to convince Natasha she was overreacting, the same measured delivery he'd used to make her doubt her own memory. I made mistakes, Preston said. But they were mistakes made by a man trying to protect his family from someone who's been orchestrating every detail of our lives for 4 years. He sat down. Judge Meacham nodded. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. The courtroom stayed silent. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then Natasha stood. No one had asked her to. No cue given, no lawyer signaling her. She just stood. Judge Meacham looked at David Fletcher questioningly. Fletcher paused, then nodded permission. The exit twist was in that simple movement Natasha seizing voice rather than waiting to be granted it, proving Preston's narrative false by exercising the very agency he claimed was stolen from her. Mrs. Harrington, Judge Meacham said carefully, this is irregular, but go ahead. Natasha didn't look at me, looked directly at Preston across the courtroom. I need you to hear this. The moment a victim becomes a survivor isn't when someone rescues them. It's when they stand up without being asked. My mother never forced me to do anything, Natasha said, voice steady, no tears. For 4 years, the only person who forced me was you. Preston's jaw tightened. You forced me to quit my job. You forced me away from friends. You forced me to apologize for things I didn't do wrong. She took a breath. My mother knew something was wrong for 2 years. She built evidence. She documented everything. She coordinated with lawyers and neighbors and prosecutors. And you know what she never did? Silence. She never forced me to leave, never demanded I press charges, never told me what to do. She stood outside and waited until I was ready. Natasha's voice stayed level. That's the difference between you and her. She gave me time. You took it away. She sat down. I stared at my own hands, not looking at Preston, not at Natasha, just at my hands folded in my lap. 4 years I'd been building a door. She'd just walked through it on her own. This wasn't my victory. It was hers. Judge Meacham let the silence hold. 5 full seconds. Then she looked at Preston, at Rachel Dunham, at the evidence still projected on the screen behind the prosecution table. I've heard enough, she said quietly. I'm ready to rule. The courtroom inhaled as one. Judge Meacham looked at me and said quietly, Mrs. Caldwell, would you like to address the court before I rule? The entry twist landed in her invitation. She was giving voice to the civilian architect of the 4-year case, not just the legal counsel. Recognition of elder authority beyond the prosecution's formal role. I stood slowly. I was wearing the same simple floral dress I'd worn to the farmer's market that morning, not courtroom armor, just cotton and faded flowers. 60 years old, retired teacher, hands folded in front of me. No notes, no prepared statement, just 35 years of classroom authority in my posture. Your Honor, I began, I taught elementary school for 35 years. The courtroom was silent. Students sometimes asked why I didn't use rulers to punish misbehavior like the old days, why I used timeouts in conversations instead of hitting. I paused. I told them hitting teaches fear, not learning. If you want a child to understand why something is wrong, you have to teach them. Fear just teaches them to hide better. 35 years teaching second graders prepared me for this better than law school ever could. Children and abusers both test boundaries until they find one that holds. Same principle applies to family, I continued. Violence teaches fear. Love teaches people to want to come home. I didn't build this case to punish Mr. Harrington. I built it to protect my daughter. There's a difference. I looked at the evidence diagram still glowing on the screen. 4 years of documentation, 47 notebook entries, bar recordings, deleted texts, trust structures, all of it. Consequences aren't revenge, I said. They're education about what the world allows and what it doesn't. About what happens when you hurt people instead of loving them. My voice stayed level, teacher cadence. The one I'd used to explain difficult concepts to children who needed to understand why rules existed. For 4 years, I watched Mr. Harrington test boundaries, watched him see what he could take from my daughter, her job, her friends, her confidence, her safety. Each time she didn't leave, he took a little more. I turned then, looked at Preston directly for the first time during the entire trial. "I don't hate you," I said to him. "I hate what you did to my daughter. I hate that you made her afraid in her own home. I hate that you taught her to apologize for existing." His face was stone. "I want consequences," I continued, "not to destroy you, but so you understand there are consequences. So you learn that hurting people isn't allowed, that taking from them isn't allowed, that there are boundaries that hold. You think this story is about punishment. It's about the lesson, always has been." The exit twist settled over my words. I wasn't seeking Preston's destruction. I was seeking his education. The entire 4-year case reframed from revenge narrative to teaching moment. Justice as classroom, consequences as curriculum. "That's what 50 years of teaching taught me," I said. "People can learn, but only if the lesson is clear. Only if the boundaries hold. Only if the consequences are real." I turned back to Judge Meacham, nodded slightly. "Thank you for letting me speak." I walked back to my seat, sat down, folded my hands in my lap. Under the table. Natasha reached over and took my hand, squeezed once. I squeezed back. Judge Meacham wrote something in the file in front of her, set down her pen, looked at Preston, then at Rachel Dunham, then back at the evidence diagram still glowing on the screen. "Mr. Harrington," she began, voice carrying the weight of what came next. "Mr. Harrington," Judge Meacham said, "based on the evidence presented, I find probable cause for trial on all charges. Bail is revoked. You will be held pending." Barrett found me in the courthouse hallway during recess, manila folder in hand, expression I'd never seen before, uncertain. "We need to talk," he said quietly. We sat on a bench by the window, February light coming through, pale and cold. "The prosecution wants to add conspiracy to defraud," Barrett said. "The deleted texts about researching elder manipulation, the forged documents, the attempted land sale, it all adds up to conspiracy. If we add that charge, he gets 5 to 7 years total." He paused. The entry twist landed in his next words. Without it, he's looking at 18 months plus conditions, mandatory treatment, restraining order, but 18 months, not 7 years. I looked at him. "What's the uncertainty?" "Beckett is 5 years old," Barrett said quietly. "Critical development years. Losing his father for 7 years versus 18 months, that's different." The prosecutor asked me to ask you, do you want the conspiracy charge? Power to choose. Power to add 5 more years to Preston's sentence. Power to ensure maximum punishment. What happens to Beckett if we add it? Barrett looked out the window. He grows up with a father in prison through elementary school, visits behind glass. Maybe he understands when he's older. Maybe he doesn't. I thought about Eugene's diary. The line I'd read 100 times. I worry most about the kind of man who learns to control through fear because he grew up afraid. Revenge would have felt good for maybe 10 seconds. Then I'd have to live with the look on a 5-year-old's face when his father didn't come home. Drop conspiracy, I said. Keep forgery and assault. He needs accountability. But that child needs a father. Even a flawed one, who's learning. Barrett nodded slowly. You're giving him mercy. I'm giving Beckett a chance, I corrected, to not grow up creating another version of his father. Justice isn't about making the other person hurt as much as you did. It's about making sure they can't hurt anyone else the same way. We went back into the courtroom. Judge Meacham delivered sentence. 18 months conditional incarceration with eligibility for work release after 6 months, and mandatory alcohol counseling and anger management treatment. Permanent restraining order prohibiting contact within 500 meters of Natasha Harrington. The forgery charges remain a separate civil matter. The bailiff stepped forward. Preston stood. Officers moved to handcuff him. As they secured his wrists behind his back, Preston turned, not looking at Natasha, not looking at his son in the back row with his parents, looking at me. The exit twist landed in his eyes genuine recognition. He'd spent 4 years battling the wrong opponent. Dismissed the poor widow in the shabby farmhouse. Underestimated the woman who'd spent 35 years teaching children about boundaries and consequences. "I'm sorry," he said. To me. Not to Natasha. To me. I met his eyes, held them for 3 seconds, then nodded once. Acknowledgement without forgiveness. Recognition without reconciliation. The officers let him out. Outside the courthouse. February sun breaking through Tennessee clouds. Natasha took my hand. "You gave him mercy," she said quietly. I looked at her. My daughter, finally safe. I gave us both freedom. The air tasted different, clean, like the morning after rain washes away everything that needed washing. Natasha squeezed my hand. First time in 4 years, Tennessee air had nothing to fear. We walked to the parking lot together, mother and daughter, survivor and witness. Teacher and student of what justice means when you measure it not by pain inflicted, but by futures protected. Chapter closed. Life beginning. December came quiet that year, the kind of cold that makes kitchens feel sacred. 10 months had passed since the courthouse steps. 10 months since Natasha and I walked into February sun and breathed air that tasted like freedom. The entry twist was in how much time had passed. This wasn't immediate aftermath. This was sustained healing. Natasha had moved into the renovated guest cottage on my property in April. 5 months of living independently, rebuilding on her own terms. Tonight was the first formal dinner we'd shared since the trial. I'd invited Mildred. Snow threatened outside my farmhouse windows. The wood stove radiated heat through the kitchen. Table set for 3. Pot roast, green beans, rolls I'd made that morning. Normal domesticity reclaimed after years of tactical planning. Mildred arrived at 6, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing her powder blue cardigan, the same one she'd worn to testify. "First real winter you've had in how long, Natasha?" Mildred asked, settling into her chair. Natasha paused, hands on the serving spoon. 4 years. Preston hated snow, said it was inefficient. "We'll have plenty this year," I said. "Weather says 6 inches tonight." We ate, talked about safe things, Mildred's cataract surgery recovery, my plan to repaint the barn in spring, Natasha's new job at the library in town part-time, working with children's reading programs. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Brennan interrupted. "I suggest you use it." He moved behind Todd, pulled Todd's arms back, and closed the handcuffs around his wrists. "I used Grandma's recipe," she said. "Haven't made this since..." She trailed off. "Since Thanksgiving 2022, the one where Preston criticized every bite, where she'd apologized for the crust being too thick, the filling too sweet, the pecans not toasted enough. That pecan pie carried 4 years of weight. When Mildred said it was perfect, something broke loose that had been holding too tight. Mildred took the first slice, tasted it, set down her fork. "Better than your grandmother's ever was," she said. "And hers was legendary." Natasha laughed. Real, undefensive, free. No apology, no explanation, just laughter. "You're just being nice." "I'm 80, Mildred said. "I stopped being nice in 1987. We ate pie, drank coffee." Mildred told stories about teaching Natasha in 2nd grade the time she'd stood up to a bully twice her size. Told him frogs don't give you warts, but his personality might. Comfortable silence settled over the table, the kind of quiet that means safety, not fear. Then Natasha's expression shifted. She set down her coffee cup, looked at me. "Mom, I need to know something." The room went still. Mildred stopped mid-sip. "There are questions you can't ask until you're safe enough to hear the answer. Do you ever regret," Natasha paused, "letting me choose instead of acting sooner?" The exit twist opened like a door I'd been avoiding the moral complexity of my strategy. The acknowledgement that patience had costs, not just benefits. That healing required examining those costs honestly, not pretending they didn't exist. Mildred set her cup down quietly. Waited. I looked at my daughter, 34 years old, survivor. rebuilding her life in a cottage 50 yards from my house. Still healing. Still learning to laugh without apologizing. The honest answer was complicated. The loving answer was complicated. Maybe they were the same. Yes, I said quietly. Every single day. Natasha didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared at her empty coffee cup. Mildred left at 9, headlights disappearing down the county road. And we moved to the porch with blankets and silence. December stars overhead, sharp and cold. The porch swing creaked as we settled under wool blankets, breath visible in frozen air. She knew we needed to talk, Natasha said finally. Mildred always knows. We rocked slowly. The swing's rhythm was the only sound besides wind through bare branches. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I broke the silence. After Eugene died, I didn't know how to grieve. My voice sounded strange in the cold air. I only knew how to work, to plan, to prepare. Natasha turned her head slightly, listening. The entry twist came in my admission. I isolated from you emotionally during those years. Protected you by preparing everything that trust is legal structures, all of it. But I forgot you needed me, not just my plans, me. Grief doesn't come with instructions. Just an empty space where someone used to be, and no map for how to fill it without betraying their memory. I'm sorry I wasn't present, I continued. Even when I was right here, I was so focused on building defenses against what might happen that I missed what was happening. You needed your mother. I gave you a strategist. The swing creaked. Stars wheeled overhead. I regret every single day, I said, because I watched you suffer and chose the plan over immediate action. Maybe that was right. Maybe it saved you in the end, but it still means I watched you hurt. Natasha was quiet for a long time. I counted the minutes by my breath clouds. Then she spoke. You know why I didn't send the level 3 signal sooner. I waited. I was afraid you'd say I told you so. The exit twist hit me like cold water. Not fear of Preston, not shame about the abuse. Fear of maternal judgment. Fear of 3 words that would confirm her worst belief about herself. That she'd been stupid. That she should have known. That she'd failed. I went very still. I would never say that, I said quietly. I know. Natasha pulled the blanket tighter. Now I know. But fear doesn't work on logic, does it? I'd lie in bed with a bruise on my face and think about calling you. Then I'd think about your voice saying it, I told you so, Natasha. I warned you about him, and I couldn't dial. The things that stop us from asking for help are never the things we think. It's not pride. It's fear of the 3 words, I told you so. Some nights, Natasha continued, I was more afraid of disappointing you than I was of the next time he'd hit me. Isn't that insane? No, I said. It's human. You spent 4 years building a trap to save me. I spent 4 years too afraid to ask you to. We sat with that truth. The swing creaked. Wind moved through the trees. We both held back, I finally said. You from fear of judgment, me from fear of moving too soon and losing you forever. We were both scared. We just showed it differently. Natasha leaned her head against my shoulder. First time in years she'd done that. I'm sorry I made you watch, she whispered. I'm sorry I made you wait, I whispered back. We sat until midnight passed, blankets pulled tight against December cold, stars wheeling overhead in their ancient patterns. Natasha shifted slightly. I want to learn your pecan pie crust, the one Grandma taught you. Not asking to borrow the recipe, asking me to teach her, like we had time now. The diary sat on the kitchen table, where Natasha would see it first thing. No note, no explanation, just Eugene's handwriting. Waiting. I'd left it there at dawn before she woke. For 4 years, I'd kept it locked in my bedroom safe, reading passages when I needed strength. Barrett knew about it. Mildred had seen me carry it to the porch some nights, but Natasha had never known it existed. She found it at 7:30, still in her pajamas. Beckett, eating cereal at the counter. Mom, she held it like it might disappear. Is this your father's, I said, from the last 2 years of his life? I think you're ready. She sat slowly, opening to the first page. I watched her eyes move across Eugene's careful script, the same handwriting that used to leave notes in her lunchbox, that signed permission slips, that wrote I love you on birthday cards. I didn't tell her where to start. She found it herself. March 2019, she read aloud. Lorraine worries I'm being morbid, but I need to write this down. The kind of man who learns to control through fear. He doesn't start with his fists. He starts by making you doubt your own memory. By the time you see the danger, he's already convinced you that leaving would prove you're the problem. Her voice broke. Dad wrote this 4 years before I met Preston. He wrote it after watching his sister stay with an abusive husband for 12 years, I said quietly. Your Aunt Caroline. He never forgave himself for not recognizing the signs sooner. Natasha turned pages, finding more. Entries about financial protection, about teaching daughters to recognize isolation tactics, about the difference between love and possession. Beckett looked up from his cereal. Grandpa wrote that. He did, Natasha whispered, before you were born, before he even knew about you. She read for an hour while I made breakfast. Neither of us ate. Some passages made her cry, others made her laugh. Eugene's dry humor coming through, even in warnings about prenuptial agreements and separate bank accounts. Here, she said finally, October 2020. If Natasha ever needs protection from someone, don't tell her the plan. She'll try to protect me from the burden of protecting her. She's too much like her mother. She'll sacrifice herself before asking for help. So build the infrastructure quietly. Let her think she's handling it alone until the moment she realizes she never was. I'd read that passage 100 times. It was the blueprint for everything the Silent Wednesdays with Barrett, the trust structures, the 4-year wait. You built everything he described, Natasha said. I followed instructions, I said, from a man who loved you enough to write a manual for protecting you after he was gone. She closed the diary carefully, hands shaking. Outside, morning sun hit the empty garden beds where tomatoes used to grow back when Eugene was alive, and summer meant fresh caprese salad every night. Next spring, Natasha said slowly, let's plant more tomatoes. Not just a few, a whole row, maybe 2. I understood immediately. Not borrowing, not visiting, planning for next year, for permanence, for a future where summer meant something besides surviving. We'll need stakes, I said, the tall kind, and better soil. I'll help, she said, and maybe Beckett's old enough to learn about pruning. That night, she asked to keep the diary overnight. I want to read more, she said, some passages about what makes a good man. I think Beckett should hear them someday. About the grandfather who loved him even though they never met. I handed it to her. Keep it as long as you need. She held it against her chest. Did Dad really know that Preston would come? Not Preston specifically, I said, but someone like him. Your father spent 2 years preparing me for a threat he hoped would never arrive. It did arrive, Natasha said quietly. Yes, I said, but so did everything Eugene built to stop him. The envelope had a Memphis postmark, an institutional return address. Mail from prison carries a weight you feel before you open it. I found it on the porch step Thursday afternoon in early April, left by the mail carrier who probably knew exactly what it was. Spring had come to Tennessee dogwoods, blooming white along the fence line. Natasha's tomato seedlings already transplanted into the garden. Inside, she was making lunch for Beckett. I brought it to the kitchen table and set it down where she'd see it. Is that from? She didn't finish. Memphis Detention Facility, I said. Return address. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, sat across from me. We both looked at the envelope for a moment. Preston's careful printing spelling out my name and address. The institutional stamp marking it as inspected. Do you want to read it alone? She asked. No, I said. I don't think I do. I opened it. 3 pages, handwritten. No lawyer corrections visible. Preston's voice without polish. Mrs. Caldwell? The counselor here makes us write letters. Most guys write to family asking for commissary money or saying they didn't do it. I'm writing to say I know what I did. They have a program here, anger management, family violence education, the kind of thing I would have laughed at 2 years ago. Last week, the counselor asked what my father taught me. I realized he taught me that fear works, control works, that making someone smaller makes you bigger. I taught Natasha the same lesson. I'm not asking forgiveness. I'm saying I understand now what I didn't understand in that courtroom. When you stood up and told the judge you chose consequences as education, not punishment, I thought you were weak. Mercy as weakness. I was wrong. You were teaching me what my father never taught me, that accountability is the first step toward change. Natasha read over my shoulder. Silent. I could feel her breathing. The second page detailed the treatment program, group sessions where men talked about the moment they chose violence. Individual therapy unpacking childhood patterns. Preston's father, a man I'd never met, who died before Preston and Natasha married, had broken Preston's arm twice before he was 12, had told him tears were weakness, had made fear the foundation of their relationship. You want to know if people can change. Wrong question. The question is, do they choose to, when consequence forces the choice? The third page was shorter. I'm not writing to ask you to tell Natasha anything. I'm not asking for visitation or early review. I'm saying thank you for not adding conspiracy charges to my sentence. My son needs a father who changed, not a father who returns unchanged. I have 8 months left. I'm using them. I know what I did. Preston. Natasha read it twice, then set it down carefully. Do you forgive him? She asked. I considered the question honestly. A year ago, I'd felt rage watching him corner Natasha through that window. 6 months ago, choosing mercy over maximum punishment. I'd felt grim satisfaction. Now, I felt something quieter. Not yet, I said, but I'm not angry anymore. That's a start. Is that enough? For today it is. Tomorrow, I'll see. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. Its dawn-breaking happens slow enough you don't notice until suddenly you can see. I stood and opened the kitchen drawer where I kept important papers. Tucked in the back was an envelope I'd sealed 4 years ago, marked in Eugene's handwriting. Open when Natasha needs. Inside was a blank check drawn on the Irrevocable Trust Emergency Escape Fund if everything failed. I'd carried it through every phase of the plan. I'd never had to open it. I filed Preston's letter next to it, 2 documents side by side. One representing preparedness, patience, strategy that worked. The other representing backup that wasn't needed. I closed the drawer. Natasha folded the letter, tucked it back in its envelope, placed it in the drawer herself. When Beckett asks about his father someday, she said quietly, I want to be able to show him this. Show him his dad tried to change. I understood then she wasn't forgiving Preston for him. She was documenting hope for their son. Spring came different that year, not just weather changing, but the kind of spring that meant something had survived winter. 2 weeks after Preston's letter arrived, Natasha got the call from Shelby County Schools. They needed a kindergarten teacher starting mid-April, maternity leave replacement that might become permanent. 15 minutes from the farm. She interviewed on Wednesday, had the offer by Friday. Her first day, she left at 6:45 in the morning. Nervous energy visible in how she checked her bag 3 times for supplies she'd already packed the night before. What if I forgot how to do this? She asked at the door. Like riding a bike, I said. Except the bike is 25-year-olds who can't tie shoes yet. She laughed, real laugh, not polite, and drove away in her Honda. I stood on the porch with my coffee mug raised in silent salute, watching her taillights disappear down the county road. She'd quit teaching 4 years ago. Not resigned, quit. Preston had insisted she stay home. Said Beckett needed her full-time, though he was already in preschool. Said her salary wasn't worth the hassle of morning routines. Said a lot of things that all meant the same thing, control. Now she was driving to her own classroom in a school where nobody knew Preston's name. She came home at 4:30, exhausted, smiling. Kicked off her shoes in the kitchen and talked for 20 minutes straight about student names. Lesson plans, classroom setup that needed work. Work conversation, not survival conversation. I have a student who only speaks in dinosaur facts, she said, eating leftover pasta standing at the counter. Every question, every answer, dinosaurs. I forgot how much I loved this. I'd taught for 35 years. I knew that particular exhaustion. The good kind that comes from herding small humans through alphabet songs and bathroom emergencies. Seeing it on Natasha's face felt like watching something return that I'd thought was gone forever. May came warm. Saturday morning, we drove to the farmer's market in Collierville early enough to get the good tomatoes, late enough that Beckett was awake and functional. Natasha was picking through heirloom varieties when I saw her freeze. Two women, mid-30s, browsing carrots and squash 3 stands down. "Friends of yours?" I asked quietly. "From before," she said. "Before Preston." I stopped returning their calls. She stood there holding a Cherokee purple tomato, weighing whether to turn around. Then one of the women looked up, saw her, and the decision was made. "Natasha, oh my God, where have you been? I tried calling." The woman rushed over, and suddenly 3 women were hugging among the vegetable stands, talking fast, catching up on 4 years compressed into 5 minutes. "I know, I'm sorry, it's been complicated. But I'm back now. Coffee next week. Please say yes." Natasha laughed. "Yes, absolutely yes." I stood 10 feet away, holding a bunch of cilantro I didn't need. Not interfering. Watching your daughter hug friends she'd lost is like watching spring return after winter you thought might last forever. We bought too many vegetables. Natasha texted coffee dates with both friends before we reached the truck. She was smiling at her phone like a teenager. That evening, my phone rang at 8. Natasha, calling from the cottage. Not emergency ring, just conversation ring. "Mom, next month I have a difficult student. Any advice?" I settled into the kitchen chair, smiling before I answered. "Difficult how? Behavioral or developmental?" "Behavioral. Smart kid, but tests every boundary. So basically you at age 6. I have thoughts." We talked for 20 minutes about patience, pattern recognition, parent communication, teaching strategies, behavior management, the difference between defiance and fear, professional advice from one teacher to another. The best phone calls are the boring ones, the ones about work problems and student behavior and normal Tuesday difficulties. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window watching lights in Natasha's cottage across the garden. She was grading papers probably, planning lessons, living a Tuesday night that looked like any other Tuesday night, which meant we'd won. Not just the case, the life after. The 8-year-old boy sitting beside me at the pond had his father's eyes, but not yet his father's anger. Winning wasn't just about Natasha teaching again or Preston learning accountability. It was about the child caught between them, Beckett, fishing with his grandmother on a June morning, asking questions no 8-year-old should need to ask. "Do you hate my dad?" he said suddenly, watching his bobber drift. I considered my answer carefully. This boy would carry whatever I said into his understanding of the world. "No," I said, "I don't hate your father. People can do bad things without being bad completely, and people can change." He was quiet for a moment. "My mom says he's trying." "He is. You used to be a teacher. 35 years. You explain like my teacher does," he said. Then his bobber jerked under, and he yanked the rod up with pure childhood joy, shrieking about the fish that got away. I watched him reset the line, tongue between his teeth in concentration. Preston's son, Natasha's son, Eugene's grandson, not defined by any single relationship, but by all of them together. You want to know if it was worth it? Ask me while I'm watching an 8-year-old catch his first fish. Ask me when my daughter calls about work instead of fear. Late June, Saturday morning. I sat on my front porch watching Mildred walk up the drive, carrying something wrapped in foil. 4 years had passed since this scene first played out. Her worried expression, her careful approach, her assessment of the poor widow who might not be eating enough. "I made pumpkin bread," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "Are you okay? I worry about you sometimes." 4 years ago, I'd deflected. Today, I smiled. "I'm fine," I said. "I've always been fine." She studied me like she had that first morning, seeing the same worn porch, the same work boots, the same woman in jeans and a faded shirt. But something had shifted in how I held myself. "The land," she said. "What will you do with it?" I looked out across the property. 3,000 acres of Tennessee red clay and pine forest. To anyone driving past, it looked like what it had always looked like. A working farm, a modest life, a woman making do. 45 million to people who know the numbers, I said. A tomato garden to people who see me. Next year, I'm planting another row. Mildred laughed. You're still as mysterious as ever. Not mysterious, I said. Just private. The phone rang inside 7 o'clock Wednesday morning, Barrett's standing appointment time. For 4 years, that ring had meant strategy sessions, evidence review, legal positioning. I answered before the second ring. It's done, Barrett said without preamble. Case closed. Everything's settled. Civil forgery matter resolved. Restraining order permanent. Trust structure untouched. Final documents filed yesterday. Yes, I said. Really settled. 60 years taught me this. Real wealth is walking your own land without looking over your shoulder. I hung up and walked back to the porch where Mildred waited. She'd poured us both coffee from the pot I kept ready Wednesday morning's habit from 4 years of Barrett's calls. I stood on the porch, watching red Tennessee clay turn gold in morning sun. Same view I'd had 4 years ago when this started. Same poverty visible from the road. Same woman standing here. But everything had changed. Mildred asked one more time, "What will you really do with all that land?" I thought about Eugene, about Natasha in her cottage grading papers for Monday's lesson plans, about an 8-year-old boy learning to fish without learning his father's anger. Live on it, I said. Just live on it. And to you listening to my story, remember this: patience isn't passive. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to wait and when to act. Looking back, I wish I'd told Natasha sooner about the plan. Those 2 years she carried fear alone that haunts me. I thought protecting her meant keeping secrets, doing everything myself. Don't make my mistake. If someone you love is in danger, build your strategy carefully. Yes, but don't let them feel abandoned while you do it. Isolation is what abusers use as their weapon. Don't accidentally become another source of it. This wasn't a revenge story, though some might see it that way. It was about protection. Revenge is hurting someone back. Protection is making sure they can't hurt anyone again. I believe God put me through those 4 years of waiting because He knew I had the patience to build something that would last. The Lord's timing is always perfect, even when it feels agonizingly slow. Preston got mercy because breaking cycles requires accountability, not hatred. That's the lesson from this revenge story. Real justice doesn't destroy the person, it stops the pattern. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done differently? If you know someone who needs to hear this message about patience and protection, please share it with them. And if you want more stories like this, stories about resilience and choosing wisdom over reaction, please subscribe. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know that you spent this time with me. One final note. While this story contains fictionalized elements for narrative and learning purposes, the lessons about protection, patience, and breaking cycles of harm are very real.